Wednesday, August 27th. Welcome to the retreat. Just a little intro information. The purpose of our retreats is for the board to have a little more in-depth discussion on topics that are selected by the board. Our discussions sometimes lead to things becoming a future agenda item, but we do not officially vote on things at the retreat, only at regular meetings. So retreats are open to the public and are recorded for future viewing. Typically do not have public comment at retreats and ask anyone with comments to deliver them during the public comment segment of the regular meeting, which will be later this evening. And do you have any preferences on the agenda? We do need, well, a couple of notes on the agenda. We do need to have a hard stop at 5:30. We've got Matthew Berger from Brixmor coming in to meet with us, so that's going to be at 5:30. And we also have a committee interview at 6:50, so we'll need to break down probably 6:40 to change over the room and then do that committee interview about 6:50.
The food will be here about 5.
Yeah, between 4:30 and 5. 4:30 and 5.
Okay, so why don't we plan to stop at 5 for food, and then that will lead us right into Matthew Berger.
2 hours.
Okay, so 2 hours. Here we go. What about we start with A? I was thinking, well, I don't really have any main preferences. I think the order that we've got them in is okay, unless some people would prefer to.
Okay.
Okay. All right, we start with design options for town monument signs.
Yeah, so there's money in the 5-year budget for entry monument signs. One at on McCaslin on the north end of town, Highway 128, and then on the east end on Colton near the Resolute property. 2 in 2019 and 1 in 2020. And staff has been working on possible design options, so we're just looking to get some feedback from the board on the 2 that we have in the packet, and then based on your comments, we'll make revisions or come back with additional options if you'd like.
So I have a question about the first design. So with the lighting that we're looking at, there's one that has kind of like a reddish lighting, and then one has a white lighting.
Mm-hmm.
Are those just alternative options?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I like both designs. I'll just go first here. My concern with the first option, the lower right-hand corner, seems a little busy, and at night, you know, if you're looking at that in terms of the contrast, the town of Superior seems to get lost in the background, whereas it appears to pop more with the two-tone color with the reddish lighting. But if we're just looking at things that really make an impact, I like the second design better. It seems to evoke the flat irons. I think it's a little more consistent also with the monument signs that we looked at with the town center. You know, angular and evoking, you know, the jaggedness of the flat irons. I like the darkness of, and just, you know, seeing the town of Superior there. It seems to pop more on the second sign, and I just think it's a little more interesting in terms of just the angular nature of it all. So my preference is for the second one. I like the option of having some color in there, but it doesn't necessarily need to have the color.
I like the second one too because it's more unique than the first. But the first time I looked at it, I thought the flat iron fell over. So I was at first, I go, wait a second, the flat iron fell over. But it is more unusual, and I like too that you see, as you said, Superior stands out at night when it's lit more. The first one is interesting, but it looks like any other town sign to me that you could find around. But again, my first thought was, oh my God, the flat iron fell over. Sorry.
On the second one, why did we choose to say Superior, Colorado rather than small town of above Superior? Move Superior down? Are we contemplating home rule? Where we're the city of Superior?
No, no, it's We could easily just put Town of Superior rather than Superior, Colorado.
It works with it flush, right? Small town, small
Mhm.
Superior,
Yeah.
then even where the Colorado ends, you know,
Yeah.
on the bottom plane.
Yeah.
They know they're in Colorado, they may not know
Mhm.
they're in Superior. You
Right.
know, so
Yeah.
it's just consistency with the logo at that. Does
Mhm.
anybody else care?
So I had a couple similar, I mean, frankly, the reason why I almost preferred the first one over the second one was because silly as it is, I like the town of Superior resonates more with me than Superior, Colorado, and I thought with the shape, it might be hard to do Town of Superior. I also think our logo is cool, and it's probably not used enough. And I like how the logo on the first one was, how big is that? That's about 6 feet, 2 inches, if I'm reading that right. And the second one is 3 foot 9 inches. Am I reading that right? Yeah, so that's, almost twice the, not diameter.
What are you, what
Height,
dimension
yeah,
are you giving?
Right.
well,
I like-
diameter,
Kevin?
yeah, every
Right.
diameter's around.
Circles, so right.
That's
right.
diameter, yeah, that's right.
I like the bigger logo,
Okay.
was what I was saying, but I'm not sure, like, it's hard to say the second one would be great with Town of Superior and a big logo, because the shape of the, I want to say
Yeah.
rock, but it's not rock, it's the steel, around aluminum frame. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we can go back and design it with Town of Superior with the bigger logo and bring it back and
Yeah.
I do think, though, that when
Do
you
that option as well.
put it up someplace on a website, I like the idea that you can say, if you see that it says Superior, Colorado on it. Because even our website itself is superiorcolorado.gov. And Town of Superior doesn't really, people don't say, well, oh, you're from the Town of Superior. So I don't know that it's necessary to have that going forward into the future. I think more important is that if you see that on the top of our banner or someplace, I'd like to be able to say the Colorado, because there are a lot of Superiors throughout the United States.
And with signage, less is more.
Right.
You can get lost in too many words.
Mhm.
Right.
And if this is, meant to notify drivers who are, traveling relatively fast on McCaslin, getting off 128, coming out of Colton, they want to know that they're entering Superior.
Right.
That's the whole purpose of this, and that this is evoking some consistent kind of feel for the town.
So are you saying you prefer Superior, Colorado, or are you saying you prefer Town of Superior? Or you don't care as long as Superior is really big?
So I don't feel strongly about Town of Superior. What I feel more strongly about is that, that's not what I want to focus on. What I want to focus on is that we have something really distinctive and impressive and eye-catching, rather than something that just gets lost in a number of words. I think the second option is more eye-catching, particularly at night with the contrast. And that's why that's my preference. And if it just says Superior, Colorado,
You good?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
It's got the logo there. I think our logo is unique and is something that we should use. I like the fact that we have that on our street signs. That's one of the unique things about the town.
I think Kevin makes a good point. If, as I suggested, you move it down, you have to change the angle to allow that word Superior down lower. I don't think it's worth the bother,
Right.
since it works well as designed.
Mhm.
And frankly, at some point in the future, this community may go home rule, in which point Town of Superior may no longer be used in the logo. And
It would likely still be a town, even if it's.
It really?
Yep.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that does.
well, how big do you have to be to not be a town? Or is it a size issue?
It's
It's a naming issue.
It's a
isn't it?
naming issue. It used to be a size, well, at first it wasn't a size issue, then it was a size issue. Now it's not anymore, but
Oh, okay.
most that go home rule decide to remain a town. So
Oh,
that would be
okay.
up to
Well,
whoever.
we might want to be the city.
You never know.
Anyway, okay.
And what's the thing next to it? Why is there a 4-foot base next to the second one? What is that? I didn't
What is
notice
this?
it.
It's showing the width of it, that's all. It's just showing you.
It's
above.
just showing the different angle.
Yeah, the
Okay.
different angle.
I see.
Cross-section.
That makes sense. I was like,
Mhm.
what?
But what is that cross-hatching at the top? I think somebody
It's-
answered this already.
If you see down,
It's the top.
it lights up.
In this
It's a light-
random cross-hatched way,
Well, it's angular. And
Yeah.
it's angular.
so it's not just a block, it shows the angle cut.
Yeah, I know, but
But she's talking about the
Look at-
lines at the top,
the
the
bottom.
spider web
Right.
lines,
look
that
at
they're
that.
just kind of
The-
random.
It looks like it has
Not that-
neon little
Yeah,
things
right.
in it.
Right.
I don't have a problem with
Yeah,
that.
and
It
I think
just-
those look interesting.
Yeah, I do too. I think that makes it look
Um,
interesting.
So that is actual lighting,
Mhm.
okay.
Mhm.
The Samsung white LEDs.
So I prefer number 2 as well, and don't really have super strong feelings about Town of versus Superior, Colorado. I kind of like the cleaner look of Superior, Colorado. I think I do like the bigger logo suggestion, and I think it could be enlarged on here by maybe a foot without it looking odd. So I think that could be done. That would be probably my only change, but yeah, I think changing the lettering on this to Town of, it could get a little big for this.
Are these the same guys, Matt, that did the Ranch Capital signage, Da Vinci? Is that who it is, Da Vinci?
Martin Sanders.
No?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we have seen proposals from them.
Yeah,
for
they
other-
they sounded familiar,
Yeah,
that's what I
right.
was wondering.
So when we see this the next time, can you have that signage from Ranch Capital
Yeah.
here so we can do a visual?
Mhm. Yeah.
My preference is Superior, Colorado, because if anybody wants to take a picture in front of it,
Mhm.
Town of Superior doesn't mean crap.
That's a good point.
Colorado does, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, not that people do it, but people do it.
Sure.
And I would like the logo to be better. The one thing I did like more about the first one is that the logo is backlit. So you have light coming through it, which I think is gonna make it shine up, you know, where we had the reds and the gray. I just think the logo would show up nicer on the first one. But I agree with Kevin completely that I'd like the logo to be bigger.
Mhm.
But I liked them both. Didn't really care.
Okay. All right, anything further on that? Chris, we just picked new signs for the town, so. Like number 2?
Actually, I wasn't fond of Invenium. I was wondering why we didn't stick to closer to some of the signs that we have existing in town already, to these designs. So, not really fond of Invenium.
So noted.
Darn.
So noted. Okay. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Guess I'm done here.
I guess you're
Some
done.
of that item. Should we perhaps, I think B and C are kind of related, so could maybe do H, park fees, another kind of possibly softball, soft pitch item.
I think it's that soft, actually.
I think we can get through it expeditiously.
Okay,
Go ahead, Sandy.
Oh, do you want to pull it up on the, yeah, okay. Patrick's gonna pull up the attachment that was in the packet. His staff's been working on updating our fees for parks and pavilions and other amenities. And it was gonna be part of the 2019 budget discussion, but, Mark, yeah, I find it here.
The second, sir.
So we just wanted to provide a brief overview on the facility reservation process, a little bit about some of the proposed fee increases that we've been working on for the last couple of years, and then answer any questions that you might have about process or how we prioritize users or go through the application process, as well as what kind of items we look for in terms of facility damage. But really, just to kind of start your first page, which is in the packet, just gives a brief summary of the primary facilities that we're renting. The majority of all of our rentals, when you see over on the right-hand side, when we're looking roughly about 12 to 1,300 rentals, the majority of those come from the athletic surfaces at Williams Field. Occasionally, you know, we'll get stuff at Purple Park, Founders Park, and then Wildflower Park is growing in popularity. And then just something to point out on the first page, you can see a sizable jump in revenue from 2016 to 2017, and that's largely due to the fact that we started renting out the North Pool to the Rock Creek Flyers at the tune of $4,000 a month. And then we switched over to what we're calling a per player fee for our recognized partner groups. It's a little bit cleaner on the administrative side, where instead of doing a tit for tat on hours, they just pay us a flat fee for each person that's registered. So any questions on that initial page before we kind of hop over to some of our fee schedule? The next couple of pages are really just a breakdown of what you'll see from the Parks and Rec fee schedule that'll be part of the budget process. And this just kind of goes line by line what we're currently, or what we're proposing in the 2019 budget to charge for our facilities. And you could see, for the most part, we're reasonable compared to other jurisdictions. Some cases we're a little bit higher, and then some cases, you know, maybe compared to our counterparts up in Boulder, we're maybe a little bit cheaper. And then you can see there this recognized partner group, again going with the $15 per player per season. And then we tend to get a decent amount of questions on how we prioritize our usage. So going down to priority use, you can see that we generally try to categorize things. If it's a Town of Superior sponsored activity or a co-sponsored program, you know, a Chili Fest or an Ultimate Disc Camp, that'll get first billing at our facilities. Then we work with what's called recognized preferred partner groups. These tend to be our local baseball teams, our local rugby teams, Monarch Youth Football, which is a combination of Louisville and Superior kids playing football, Monarch Youth Baseball, which is a combination of Louisville and Superior. Then you'll see that we try to slot people in, at least in terms of ball fields, you know, residents or organizations located in Superior. This was a change last year per the board's request, recognizing that the Rough Riders were growing their business in town. And then you could see our fourth priority use as a non-resident or organization located outside of Superior. And just kind of a quick summary on who's using the facilities. The blue box is, these are what we would consider our repeat customers. And the biggest four being the Rock Creek HOA, Superior Elementary School, Eldo, the YMCA of Boulder Valley, and then you can kind of see the list goes on with rugby, youth football teams, Rock Creek Flyers. We did last year, in reaction to the board's request, put together a more stringent guideline on how we prioritize these priority groups, if you will. I know that you guys get asked about that frequently when you're out and about in the public. You know, why does baseball get the field over, you know, Louisville youth baseball or Lafayette baseball, or why does the YMCA get to use the field as opposed to Trouble Soccer? And we do ask the organizations to provide what you see there in the bullet point list, which is their philosophy, goals, age range, skill level, and activity. We do make them fill out all the applicable field use agreements, as well as show us proof of insurance, which I didn't put in there. But the third bullet, we started requesting rosters with address for all participants, with the goal on our end of providing at least 60% of participants to reside in town. It's a little bit difficult to do just because the population here's on the smaller side, so we do rely on places like Louisville, Lafayette, Westminster, Broomfield, and Boulder to round out some of our programs, especially youth soccer. That's why partnering with somebody like Trouble Soccer or YMCA is necessary, because if not, you'll only have 3 or 4 teams, where if we partner with the YMCA or Trouble, you'll get 8 teams. It's a little bit better quality program. We also require that everybody submit to us their concussion training, and then we also request that they submit background checks for all volunteers, and that is at their expense. Any questions on the priority status? That's probably the most frequent question we get in the office is, why do we allow one group to use our facilities and another group not? And we really kind of rank it by who has the most resident impact given that
But
season.
if I, for example, this is just facilities, or if I want to rent a shelter, isn't it first come, first served?
Unless we already had one of the kind of 4 priorities, ticked off
Designated
there.
already.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But yeah, then it is a first come, first
Right.
served.
Which is actually why I brought this up last week,
Mhm.
is as long as we give non-residents the ability to book our amenities, and they do so first,
Mhm.
they're in, right? And then it became a function of size. Your 2017 revenue of $57,000 comes out to about $40 per reservation, right? $45 per reservation.
Mhm.
Okay, and I suspect that it takes more than $45 worth of staff time to get it ready and to return it to good shape
Mhm.
afterwards, right?
Mhm.
So it seems to me, at least for non-residents, we want to break even or make money.
Sure.
Perhaps even cover the cost of the resident use, right?
Sure.
Because we're
Definitely do that.
losing money if you take into account costs. You know, you have to net out that revenue based on how many staff minutes or hours it takes to get it ready and then return it to good shape.
Cindy, I had almost the exact same observation that, this isn't, I recognize that we're not trying to create a P&L on this, and it's great, we have $57,000 worth of revenue, but it's not gonna move the needle too much, but we have to get it right. But I do think it is an interesting incentive almost for non-residents to rent some of the pavilions and some of the space. I like, your numbers. I went on the Broomfield website last night. The numbers I was looking on the website were a little bit different than what I saw here, but pretty much aligned. But Broomfield, the city and county, basically charges 3x for non-residents than what they do residents.
Mhm.
And, your proposed difference is, it's a 20% tax instead of a 300% tax. I like what Broomfield's done. I think it should be 3x.
Okay.
Personally.
And if you look at who's using the facilities, all of that whole list would be considered nonprofits or community organizations like that, and they even get the lower rates than
Right.
residents.
Yeah,
So,
actually-
and that's kind of odd to me, that some of
Yeah.
those players on there, I don't necessarily think that they should get a rate lower than the resident rate.
Yeah, I don't think Broomfield distinguishes, that's a good pickup. I don't
Mhm.
think Broomfield makes that distinction. I don't want to be a me too with Broomfield. But I think maybe it would simplify for you guys in saying, well, are you a nonprofit or are you a community group? No, are you renting this as a resident or a non-resident?
Well, why couldn't it be the same rate as the resident?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, exactly.
Yeah, right. Instead of asking them, it's, if they are a nonprofit or a community youth group, then they get the resident rate. All others pay the higher.
Well, I would suggest that any community group is actually a resident, right? And not just, so there's 2 columns instead of 3 for us. Instead of a community group, resident, non-resident,
Mhm.
is resident, non-resident, and then leave it to staff to, obviously, if El Dorado is Superior,
Yeah.
if Ms. Hamasaki wants the rent, she's a resident. I'm sure she
Right.
lives somewhere else, but we're obviously gonna charge her, the El Dorado group, the resident rate, because they're
Right.
resident, their business is.
Well, I think
resident.
there's only 2 rates, a resident rate, which
Yes.
also pulls in the community groups, and then a non-resident rate.
But if
I
you
think
say-
there's a difference though, because, so when we're looking at these facility rentals, I view these as kind of two separate discussions. There are the rentals that we have for these community groups that are repeat users, right? The soccer clubs, the rugby clubs, the people that are going every week, and, they want to be good users, stewards of these facilities, because they don't want to lose the opportunity to continue to use it. And regardless of whether they're a resident or not, a lot of our residents are participating in, we've got kids participating in youth sports. versus the one-time rental of like a pavilion for a special event, whether it's a party, a wedding, something like that. And that to me is a different discussion because, you know, you're not dealing with the same kind of repeat factor. And, you know, that's where, you know, what came up at the last meeting caused some concern because, you know, maybe we are on a list of beautiful facilities that are, you know, party planner list, you know, beautiful facilities that are cheap. So how do we make sure that, you know, and what we're having is, you know, when we have people who are then the later user and they're coming there and all the trash cans are full and the coals are still, you know, burning on the grills.
Or the residents want to walk
Or the residents
through
want to
and
use it. You know, that to me is, I think, really the more pressing thing that we need to be addressing. And, you know, I guess I would like to know how many, have we actually ever collected against the security deposit that people have funded? Is that sufficient? I mean, that's really, to me, what is going to keep people on their best behavior is if we up the damage deposit to something significant where, okay, if they trash the facility, then all of a sudden they're losing $1,000, not just $200.
And then we have to then enforce that. A lot of this is on weekends.
Right.
How
Well,
is it observed?
And maybe by increasing that damage deposit, we have the means to then maybe have a trash pickup on the weekend, you know, at some point halfway through the day, just to make sure that, you know, the facilities, or, you know, on those weekends when we have a lot of reservations, to make sure that we know that the trash cans are gonna be full by, you know, 2 p.m. and we've got it booked through 6. You know, we can have somebody else, you know, go out
I
there.
actually think our pavilions, et cetera, should be rentable only by residents. I think there is enough resident use and a shortage of pavilions to begin with, that we don't have to invite the outside to use them.
I'd be fine with that.
So, and then, I think people need to schlep off their own trash. You have a party, bring your trash bags, you schlep it off.
Right.
So that, whether or not we want to have somebody on staff come by anyway to check condition and sign off the checklist, et cetera, and remove any excess trash that isn't schlepped off, that's fine. But why not have the requirement? Similar to the Boy Scouts, leave it better than you found it, right? You bring it in, you haul it off. That's the standard on every trail, on every mountain you climb, et cetera, bring it in, haul it off. Why isn't it like that in our park system? Let's make it that way.
And that's the way it is over in Thornton. I know I was over there, we went for a baby shower over there, and they charge you based on the number of people you're gonna have. So based on, you know, the more people you have, the higher cost. And you had to remove all the trash from the site, but they had a dumpster in the park somewhere. But you still had to remove all your trash, and you had to leave it the way you found it. And you could only be there for the hours that you rented it for. And it was pretty pricey, you know, to rent, and depending again on the number of people that you had there. So when I'm saying, when I'm saying resident rate, I'm just saying don't have 3 rates in the lower rate than the resident rate for the groups. That's what, I didn't mean that they had to be residents necessarily, but don't have a lower rate for the non-resident groups. That's what I was saying. Use 2 rates.
But to Mark's point, though, I mean, you brought up a good point about there's all these fields are being used by youth groups that are used to this pricing, and if we go to them and say, hey, you know, out of simplification, we just bumped your rate by, you know, 50%, that could significant. So I guess before we do that, and then have a bunch of people coming down here saying, what are you guys doing? You've built all these fields, and now you've thrown our pricing out of whack. We've got to, you know, raise rates, turn away kids, whatever. I mean, that's.
Well, I don't think there's that much of a difference between the nonprofit community organization rate and the resident rate.
There is.
There is?
Where?
15 to 20, 30 to 45, well, that's 50%. Williams Field. Yeah.
It's significant. I mean, and especially when you're talking every week for, you know, 6, 8 weeks, whatever their programs are, and if they're doing practices and games and things. So
I don't know, Clint, I kind of disagree on this one. It feels like if you're if we have an organization like the YMCA that is clearly targeting, not clearly, but it's a very inclusive organization, and they're coming to us saying, hey, we're struggling on the increase in rate, then it feels like something that Matt and staff should be able to do without bringing to the board. But if Treble or FC Boulder or Broomfield Soccer Club is struggling with our rates, I'm not sympathetic. You know, I have kids in youth sports, and someone was due, and we know how expensive it is, and the fact that we're getting $57,000 in revenue, but kudos. I saw somebody yesterday on a Saturday driving around picking up garbage in Wildflower Park, which was great, and I loved. And I meant to walk over and say, hey, thanks for doing that. But it was somebody that we were paying to pick up garbage. There's no way, whatever rental we had in Wildflower this weekend, there's no way it paid for the cost and the inconvenience of having one of our staff there. We can't raise these rates enough, as far as I'm concerned, for the non-resident. But we shouldn't be priced outside of our neighbors in Broomfield. So I think we just match Broomfield. That's just basically, the non-residents have 3X. I don't love the idea of requiring people to haul off the garbage and saying they're gonna not recover the deposit. You know, I think it was Broomfield that, sort of said, if you could haul off your garbage, that would be ideal, but if it's full, please bag it and put it next to the can appropriately. I mean, to me, that feels like it's sufficient.
It is not sufficient.
You
know it's not
Yeah,
sufficient.
I
I schlepped off their bags after the 4th of July. My husband, I had him grab one, I grabbed the other to get it out of there, so we quit blowing off.
And I've done it a couple times too, where I've actually encouraged
So
people saying,
schlep,
hey,
they
come,
need to-
I've made them schlep it to my house
They
instead
have
of me
50
schlepping it.
people there, throw a couple of bags in each trunk, et cetera. I don't think that's negotiable. The problem, our taxpayers have paid for these facilities, and we deserve every right to go in at any point in time and enjoy without having to pick up trash, to haul off trash, and otherwise have them blighted in a way. So I think we start establishing our mantra, the same as the region, bring it in, haul it off, leave it the way you found it. And because the interesting thing, sometimes when you put a deposit down, you say, I'm willing to forfeit it to allow them to clean it up, right? Right? Think of college apartments.
Yeah.
I'm willing to pay that $500, forfeit that, because this place has been trashed, right? Anyway, so I just think it engenders respect for an asset here, and,
Or maybe we have some option, maybe there's a trash option of, additional costs or something. I mean, we do have staff.
why are we doing this? You come to
At a
the
cost.
park in a car, you bring all the paper plates and all the glasses and all the cans and all, you bring it all in your SUV,
Yeah.
right? So
That's
why
all.
don't you schlep it all off in your SUV?
People don't want to.
Well, make them. That's
Well,
the,
maybe
that's
they
the
need to
privilege
go
of
to,
using our
I
facilities.
think it's gonna depend
Another
though, right? I mean, I think
facility,
if,
yeah.
right, if you're having your daughter's, 15th birthday party, you could do that. If you're trying to host something for the Flyers or the 5th grade welcoming committee, and you've got a ton of families, that's a pretty big burden to the people that are, these are volunteers who are bringing the community together. I don't know. I mean, if it works, it works. I'd love nothing more than them to haul it off.
I think
I'm the volunteer on a couple of these things, and
You bring it, you haul it off.
loathe the fact that I'd have to haul off all the garbage.
Well,
Are we
the-
seeing any kind of disparity between non-resident usage of the pavilions versus resident usage and the amount of trash, or does it totally depend?
Now, and just to kind of quickly add to that, more often than not, whatever the group is, they'll have the resident contact us. So even with Boulder Valley Hockey, they just have a resident fill out the paperwork. Or a lot of times when we get the corporate rentals, they'll just find whoever works in town and fill out that paperwork.
Right,
So we actually don't find that there's a huge group of non-residents that rent our facilities.
Because they want to get, even though they're largely out of town, they want to take advantage of the resident rate.
And we also see, again, like you mentioned, a rental on the 4th of July. we typically actually don't know about those, and we didn't have anything
And
formally
the reason
rented
not
this
to leave
weekend.
those bags there is there are coyotes all over the place in Wildflower. They scavenge those bags don't stay intact. So the bottom line is you have your party for 100, Kevin, let's say, your scenario, et cetera, and it's a lot of trash, but you brought it in, you brought Rita knows she party plans, all that trash came in people's trunks and SUVs.
It was neater though when it came.
But you leave it all there, then the 100 or 200 or 300 residents who use it for the rest of the weekend are inconvenienced and have to navigate around that pile of trash or trash bags and whatnot. I just don't think that's what we're about in this town. Leave it as you found it, schlep it off, and
So
then
maybe
there's no
what we
problem.
need to do is, if we have rentals that are going to be of a certain size,
Right.
then we need to have some sort of procedure that will enable the trash to get off. Because if it's not a problem on most weekends, when we're just having residents just using it in the ordinary course, then maybe we're overthinking this. But if we're dealing with these, once in a while rentals of 50 plus, 100 plus, 150 plus, well then we need to have procedures in place to ensure that the pavilions aren't trashed.
We are not overthinking it. The trash cans we have now, plus they're divided into recycle and regular. If you just have a little grill, hamburgers for a small group, you fill that thing, right? You fill it. We don't have mammoth trash cans out there. So the overthinking, I think, comes by not insisting everybody bring it in, take it off. The trash cans there alone are filled with individual Coke cans. When I go with a water bottle or a can of Coke and throw it in there, that's what fills them up after a weekend's use, particularly a long weekend. So anything other than that, I think, should be, and that's what you expect the trash can to be used for. You don't expect it to be, for one, when you get a bag stuffed, it doesn't fit in a trash can. It has to go to the side. Even your own trash can in your kitchen wouldn't fit in there if it were full, much less one of these big old black steel line things. So I say bring it in, haul it off, leave it as you found it, make it easy. And nobody has to sit there and say, well, is it small enough that I can leave it here? Is it big enough that I have to schlep it off? No. Bring it, you take it back.
Okay, makes sense.
I do think there is a size thing that needs to be discussed here, both resident and non-resident, but particularly non-resident. Over a certain size should have a fairly substantial security deposit if we're going to do it at all. And, just say 50 can be accommodated, right? But when you have the 200 from the other day, that's really huge. And a facility, when you have 200 in a park, it means the residents don't get to use that facility largely, because those 200 are sort of in the shelter, but they're way outside the realm of the shelter, so they sort of take over the park, right? So we do have to talk, I think, about the size of the party that we're going to allow. We don't have to do it right here and now. You've heard a lot to come back to us with sort of a second draft of this, but particularly for non-residents, I don't think we need to allow over X number of people. What that X is open to discussion.
At Broomfield, you have to call. I forget what the number was, but it listed some rates and then it
Yeah.
said over, and maybe it was 150, but it didn't even give you a rate, it said call. So they obviously want to talk to you and make sure you're legit and.
Yeah, I would say, over 75 call. 150 is a big deal. You
Right.
have 150 in Wildflower, it's pretty much taken over Wildflower.
Right.
150 in Purple Park, less of a footprint, but it's still significant. So I just say we always have to remember why we built these amenities.
Okay. So what's the action on that?
So I've got just a couple notes, but my first thought is I'll come back as part of the fee schedule with revised fees and process.
And costs. what is the cost? Extrapolate the cost of, especially the non-groups. The groups, I agree, they better be good stewards, otherwise we don't renew them next year or whatever. I mean, like the soccer clubs and whatnot. But of the pavilion and park rentals for parties, individual parties and stuff, what is our cost of preparing them? What's the cost of cleaning up?
Do you
Yep.
send staff every day to all the parks to check them out?
Yeah, so we've got 106 trash cans in town and they get emptied every day. It is various times, sometimes twice a day. And then through May and June, we actually keep a 3-yard roll-off dumpster at Purple for that very reason. But we can shift some of that around, and there are lots of jurisdictions that do dumpster fees and
Right.
dumping fees, and with the HOA, we actually pay to have, on some of these, we've actually paid to have Vargas come in. Now, maybe that's a cost that we can eventually pass on, but, some of these, we actually have Vargas show up to help with the cleanup. So,
Hey, Patrick, just a side note, side question. Is there opportunities for the user groups to volunteer time to maybe pick up after some of these rentals?
yeah,
Because I know within our organization,
Mhm.
they're really looking for volunteer hours.
yeah.
So if that's possible, we'll go.
It's actually a really good idea. Have them come by, even if they didn't pick anything up, but even just to send, hey, I inspected and it looks great, and they send Patrick an email and
That'd be
make
great.
it an hour.
Especially with the youth group, it's this, remember when we were having the graffiti problem, which we probably still are having?
Not like it was.
It's
It was horrible.
peer pressure. These are your parks, these are our parks, let's take care of them kind of thing. And it wouldn't hurt, I'm sure there are signs out there, we don't have to, we can buy them pre-done, that basically says, this is your park, take care of it in a clever way that whenever I'm out there, if there's an empty can or bottle or whatever, I pick it up. I've seen other people do the same thing, but we could all do that. We could pick up after ourselves, right?
As long as it's just ourselves, not somebody else.
Okay. All right, let's next tackle item E, which is Town 15 sale. And this is, the question here is, does the town want to sell the property? And Kendra, maybe you can help me with the mechanics of this. We've had some discussion amongst the board about, is this appropriate on the retreat agenda? Does this need to be on a board agenda?
Sure.
Maybe just kind of walk us through.
So I think and stop me if I'm wrong, but I think the purpose of it being on the retreat agenda was to determine whether there's any interest in selling it in the first instance. If there's not, then you don't have to have it as an agenda item. You could, because no response is required. Obviously, there's an offer, right? You've all received an unsolicited offer for a property that was not for sale at the time. So if you don't want to sell the property, then there's no need to entertain that offer. No formal response is required. You could also leave it on the agenda and vote for a formal response of thanks but no thanks. Or, obviously, if you want to sell it, then you can leave it on the agenda to consider the offer. So I think the first thing to do here is determine, do you want to sell the property? And just in general, not about this offer, just in
Right.
general, do you want to sell the property to anyone at any time or right now?
At any time, it's hard to say, but at the moment, no interest.
And that's a discussion. If it's no interest at the moment, then that's the purpose of the retreat discussion.
Yeah,
If it's
but-
not, then,
But there's a very fine line between no at the moment and no, not at the current offer. It's a very fine line, because I'm not no at the moment if in fact there's a $10 million offer on the table, right? So, see where this becomes a very fine line?
But I don't think it is a fine line, because the offer that's on the table now, even though it's lowball, we don't know really that much about what they want to do. We have not heard anything addressed to the board about what's in it for the town, what's it going to cost the town, how is he going to finance, everything about that project.
That's the reason to have it as an agenda item, so that the applicant can come and
Wait.
flesh out
again,
the
if you want to sell the property, if nobody wants to sell the property, then
But I will say I have no interest in selling the property without a robust process to engage the community on an appropriate process. So if somebody came in tomorrow and said, I'd like to buy your property for 50 million, my answer would still be no.
Yeah.
It will require a community engagement process that this board has not prioritized, so I'm 100% comfortable saying this property is not for sale, and we have no interest in accepting any offers. Period, end of story, at any price, for me.
So I agree with the community outreach aspect. You know, from my perspective, I'm very grateful that the town had the foresight to purchase this property when it did. I think it's a very valuable asset. It gives us a number of options. Right now, it's not for sale, and I'm not interested in selling it to anybody. That said, I think before, it's not really a discussion of whether we want to discuss having that property up for sale or not, or to sell it to somebody. But I think what we really need to have a community discussion about is, what does the town actually want to use that
Right.
property for?
Right.
The item above,
Yeah,
the item above
the
this
item
is really
above,
the
and
item.
that's what I'd really like to have, you know, massive community outreach for, is, you know, what does the community want to see this asset become? Do they want to see it unimproved? Do they want to see it dedicated for open space? Do they want to see it as parks or fields? Do they want to see a community center there? Do they want to see a rec center there? I mean, there's any number of options. Do they want us to sell it to a private developer so they can develop residential units? I don't know, and none of us know, because we haven't had that discussion. But at least the discussion about selling the property, as we sit here today, I'm not interested in selling it at all. I think it's a useful asset, and we can't have that discussion about selling it until we have a discussion first as to what we want to do with it.
I'm in complete agreement with that. You
Right.
can't talk about selling it until you know what you want to do with it. And then also, how best could the town benefit from it? You know, we haven't had that discussion yet. Selling it may end up being in a free, open, competitive sale, offered for sale to anybody. All comers might be the best way to maximize the value from that. But we haven't had the discussion, so we don't know. So to just talk about selling it today, you can't do that until you can talk about what do you want to use and how can we maximize the value out of it. And we haven't had that at all.
Yeah,
No.
we've owned this, the town has owned this property for 4 years, and there's not been any real priority to discuss any priorities on the property. So I am in agreement that selling at this time does not make sense. I think once the new board is seated, that will be an opportunity to have a more robust discussion about if we want to. Do we even want to have a robust discussion about what the priority should be for that property, or do we want to focus on other priorities? I mean, it's been there for 4 years, and it's been perfectly fine with this board for 4 years, and it might be another 4 years. I don't know, or it might be 4 months. I just don't know, but not in a hurry to do, I'm not in a hurry to do anything on it without a complete, robust discussion with the community.
Yeah, I think also, I'm sorry, I just want to make one more comment then, Sandy, I'll let you. The other thing is that there are other people who have offered and said, I would like to buy it, but since we didn't have it for sale, they didn't realize they could make a bid. So to entertain one unsolicited bid doesn't make sense to me without being able to offer it for sale if we were going to sell it to others.
Correct.
And we, you know, in order to get to that determination, you got to determine what are the plans, or what is the plan for that? What is the town's plan for that piece of property? Sandy?
Yeah, I guess my comment would be is, we have already once in this town sold a piece of land without looking at it competitive, you know, offering it up for competitive people to come in and say, hey, I might give you $10 million for this piece of land. And I'm particularly speaking of the piece of land there. We did not open that up when we decided that we would fill in the detention pond. And I don't want to see us make that mistake and have the residents second guess us again. I'm not saying we did the wrong thing by making that decision. What I'm saying is we did not open up the detention pond corner for a competitive bid process to see what our options might be. And I don't want us to ever do that again. So if we're going to sell, my only way to do it is that we open it up and see what the interest is. We're gonna sell it, make us an offer on what you might be willing to put there, but otherwise, without opening it up for a competitive offering, I have no interest in selling at this point in time. And I really want us to have, the other discussion is, what do we really want to do with this piece of land? Right now, it is zoned commercial, and we have a whole lot of people in town who think it's open space. And I think we cannot kick the can down the road anymore on this piece of property. We must engage on the Town 15 before we have even more people saying, oh, it's open space. No, it is not open space. It is, right now, zoned commercial. And we need to really stop kicking this down the road and have the discussion.
I don't disagree with anything I'm hearing here, but I think we're also being disingenuous. And so hear me out. Totally in agreement that we need a public process, and we need to listen to the public as to what their opinions are, what should be done with it. Then the board at that time needs to reconvene and see where that falls into the broad plans for the town, right? And some decision has to be made at some point in time. But it all starts with the public process. We have to hear from the public. But having said that, any piece of property is subject to an offer coming in at any point in time. We received an offer on this, and we could receive an offer tomorrow for $10 million for this particular piece of property. And if we did receive one tomorrow for $10 million or $100 million or whatever, the board, I believe, has to act on that offer. And I'm a little disconcerted, Kendra, by what you said. That's why I put the memo out last week, and maybe I read your response differently. When the board gets an official offer on anything, my belief was that the board has an obligation to then respond to that official offer in an official capacity. And today, a retreat's unofficial. A retreat is simply opinion and head nodding, right? And that's why, in my belief, this was wise to be put on the agenda so we could respond in an official capacity to it. So, does an official offer
No.
to purchase an asset of the town not need an official response?
No, if it's not for sale,
But how
if
do
you're
we know
rejecting an
that
offer-
if we don't officially take it to a board meeting and have an official vote that says it's not for sale?
because
Otherwise,
it's not for sale right now.
It's
Technically, it's not up for sale.
it's not up for sale, but
Yeah.
if an offer's if an offer's made, then if we don't have an official process to deal with that offer, then we are subject to staff saying to this official offerer, this official bidder, saying it's not for sale.
Right.
To me,
Well, it's the same as if somebody walked in and offered you money for town hall tomorrow. It's not for sale, so you don't have,
The point is,
You don't need to respond to every offer.
no.
I mean, I could come up and
okay,
say,
now
I'll pay
let's,
$20 for
we're
your
getting a
house.
little convoluted here.
I don't
Okay.
think so. I think it's just like anybody coming to Matt saying, hey, I've got this piece of property that I'd like you guys to consider buying. And Matt will send us an email, or he'll mention it in a meeting, say, hey, is there any interest in engaging this? And we say, no, or that sounds interesting, yeah.
Okay,
let's talk about
but
it."
you just did the operative phrase. You said in a meeting. So.
No, I said, I said via email or in a meeting. He just brings it
To
up
me,
in
in
his
an
reports and
email, we
comments.
can't do it. So let's just do scenario here. Okay. Matt receives an official offer, written as an official document, on this for $10 million, right?
For
And
build
Matt,
what?
huh?
For Town 15?
Town 15.
To build what?
And it's Google.
And it's an official
Suppose
offer.
it's Google.
No, come on, guys,
Yeah.
you're convoluting. Matt gets an official offer for whatever purpose, with whatever details, et cetera, for $10 million, and Matt says no. I, as a sitting trustee, am gonna be a little perturbed.
Yeah, but
that
no, but
we
it
never
it
heard
matters
out
what
about
they're gonna
this.
build there. So if I say, I'm gonna give you $10 million
Max,
to build houses,
No,
that's one thing. If I say
staff
$10 million
doesn't,
to
that's
build a
why
nuclear
you
power
have an
plant.
elected board.
You can't
No,
do this.
no.
Staff doesn't get to
No.
say,
Not all offers are
well,
created equal.
a charter school is not a big enough thing, but a zoo is a big enough thing, and it's big enough if it's a zoo for me to take to
I
the
think
board.
that's, Cindy, I mean, I do, first, you said we're being a bit disingenuous. I do take a bit of an exception to that, because I don't think I'm personally not being disingenuous at all. The property ain't for sale, right? It's just not for sale. Now, it
Where I
will.
dispute that every bit of, every asset in this town is available for sale,
Just as
potentially at the right
just
price.
as somebody wants, just as I could say with confidence that my house and my car are not for sale, but if somebody falls in love with my house and wants to pay me twice what it's worth, then I suppose I'll entertain that. And I'm not being disingenuous by saying my house is not for sale, just as I don't think that we are being disingenuous by saying that Town 15 is not for sale. So I think it's perfectly reasonable for us to say Town 15 is not for sale. Now, if an offer is received on Town 15 or anywhere else, I trust Matt and the judgment of staff to say, I've received direction that this is not for sale, but this feels like something that I should take to the board. But having an offer for something that is less than 25%, that will change the direction forever of that lot, for something that is probably less than 25% of the value of that property, it's been a huge distraction to the, well, not necessarily to the board, but to the community, and I think to staff. And I think it's fair.
Couldn't disagree more, Kevin. The point is, we're setting staff up with that. The fact is, we are the elected representatives. When an official offer comes in, there's a difference with an unofficial inquiry on the phone and an official written offer. When an official written offer comes in, I believe our process as set up tonight is a defensible process. We got an official offer, and it made its way onto an official agenda, and we will, as the elected representatives of this board, dispense with that in one way or another tonight. That I can defend all the way, every day of the week. But I cannot defend somebody making an official offer and it being not treated seriously for one reason or another, never make it to the board to dispense with it in an official capacity. I cannot defend that. So I'm happy with tonight's. I am not happy with the direction that this group appears to be giving staff, that sometimes they can and sometimes they can't, and they can decide and all that. I think you are treading on very dangerous territory.
I think as offers come in, Matt or staff would give us a summary of the points, and then the board would make a determination of interest.
How? Unofficially or officially?
It doesn't have, it could be unofficially.
It's not for sale.
I don't think it can be unofficially.
If-
Otherwise, how are you collecting head nods? It has to be in an official capacity.
So what if somebody comes in and says, I will pay you $20 for this parcel of land?
You-
Should that be publicly noticed on a
He-
board meeting and us
he
spend
can
the time
say, Matt
to
can
hear that
say,
offer?
not probably, but if you're serious about it, write up an official offer.
No, okay, so it's
An
not an official offer, it's in
it's an-
paper, it's
it's
signed,
an- it has
it's
to-
official, right?
It has,
$20.
I think it's gotta go.
I think
You're
that's-
doing the other end of the
no.
extreme.
No, I'm-
This is not that type of offer today. I mean, you're trying to sandbag this. The point is, how does the board deal with an official offer? This is, you may not like this offer, you may not like what it's about or anything, but it's an official offer. And it needs to, in my
We've had
opinion.
offers in the past, though, and Matt's just reached out to us and said, is there interest in this to discuss? And we've said no or yes. We've had offers for us to purchase things in the past or to sell in the past, and we've not had to bring it before a board.
Is this an official offer that was, I mean, this was official, this was a legal offer.
What do you mean by
Official.
official?
It was official. I mean, I'm.
Legitimate
It's
and
in
maybe
writing.
reasonable
It's
is
in
a better
writing.
word. Yeah. an
Okay, but I mean, you
actual
can put anything in writing, right?
Right.
Like, and so,
It doesn't matter the form, I don't.
right, I mean, I could put a $20 offer in writing, I could
Right.
have it notarized,
Do it.
and, you know, I think that we need to be, you know, we have limited resources, we have limited time as a board, and we defer to staff a lot, right? Now, on questions when issues are gray, staff will come to the board and say, what does the board want us to do? Do you want us to notice this on a meeting? or should we just deal with this
Well,
administratively?
You've heard me. I am, every day of the week, happy to sit here at 10:30 tonight and look at the official offer that we have in front of us,
A written offer.
written offer,
Mhm.
which we have in front of us, and say, this particular proposal, with this particular description, with these particular advantages and these particular shortcomings, is being proposed at this particular price, yes, no, whatever, and have a full discussion on it and reject or accept. But I'm not at all comfortable with this gray area I'm hearing.
But Kendra asked us not to talk about this specific offer. I mean, this was, right?
Oh, well,
It was in
That's
general.
why I'm saying,
Right.
saying no.
We're talking about the
prices,
offer,
no-
but yeah, I
yeah.
know. We were, but I think, well, I think, and what Mark said too earlier is the first question I think that we kind of jumped over is, what do you want to do with the property?
Right.
So that was more what I was saying is, the
But
the proper discussion for this retreat is, what do you want to do with this property?
Right.
If one of those options includes selling the property, well, then you move
Right.
on to the second
And
step.
for me, let me just jump to that. For me, you have to have the background on this property. This property was acquired to take it off the market and to allow the town to have control over the property. There was no presumption of what it might be used for. And this is where the public, I think, has perhaps a presumption that since the town acquired it, it probably did so for open space, or it did so for parks, or it did so for fields. That is not the case at all. It was to take it off the market and give the town control of it. The second thing people need to have the history on is we've already had 2 proposals from developers. One was Richmond, and I think the other one was Rydell Homes, to develop it to residential, right? Those were voted down. Those came, by the way, to the board, and
But in different form than this is. We saw like a preliminary development plan. We
Right.
saw a whole presentation of what they want to do.
came
This
to the
is
board, and
different.
they were rejected, right? What I'm using this for is we've heard 2 residential development proposals on this particular piece of land since you and I have been on this
That's right,
board.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm just putting that as a history, so people newer to the board understand that that's the case here. When you say, are you interested in selling? I can honestly say, yes, I am interested in selling for the right price, for the right project, right? I am interested in selling it for the right price, for the right project. So, if I'm hearing you guys, are you saying you're not interested in selling it for the right price or the right project?
So,
The question is now. The question is right now. Are we interested in acting on it right now?
No, that's 2 different
So
questions.
Sandy asked the first question, I'm saying,
That is
yeah,
not the question.
and Sandy, I am saying absolutely, my only condition upon, I personally am not interested in selling this property at any price with
You're clear,
short
Kevin.
of the community engagement program.
You have made that clear.
Right, okay. So you asked, and I
start
don't think I'm
with
being
A, you
disingenuous
go to
at
B,
all
but
with that.
That's not what I heard from anybody else. I'm here to say, yes, I'm interested in selling it at the right price for the right project. That's all I have to say on the matter of, are you interested in selling it? Right price, right project.
But there's a difference between being interested in selling something and being open to selling something if an opportunity were to arise, right? One is, if you're interested in selling something, you're more along the lines of like actively looking to market it and then unload it for the right price. Being open to it is the situation that Kevin said. He's not interested in selling his house, but if somebody offered him twice what it's worth, he'd actively consider it. So, I mean, I don't think that those things are irreconcilable, and we're not being disingenuous by saying we're not interested in selling this right now.
Okay, Mark answered the question. Are you interested in selling it for the right project at the right price?
I'm not interested in selling it. I am open to anything, right? But first and foremost, I want to know what the community wants us to do
Right.
with this.
Same, what I'm saying. Community process, very important, but I'm interested in
Yeah,
selling
but
it
I mean,
at the
right
right
now, I
price
mean,
for the right project.
my feeling on this property is that this is a very valuable asset for the community. I'm very glad that we have it. It gives us tremendous number of options. But before we have any discussion about what to do with it, we need to understand what the community wants us to do with it. If the community doesn't care one way or the other, if they say, you know what, we really don't care that we have this property, well then maybe I'm going to be more interested in selling it than I am now. I am open to it if the price is right, if the project is right, but I'm not interested in doing that because right now we don't have any of that information.
Well, that is a bit parsy to me.
I don't think it is at all.
Well, I am here to tell you, I am committed to the same public process. I'm also interested in selling it at the right price for the right project. Whether or not the price is right and the project is right is going to be informed by that public process, definitely, right?
It'll
By
also
what
be
the-
informed by what the offer is.
Right, right price, right project, as counterbalanced by what the community wishes to see, and as counterbalanced by the long-term vision of this community, of this board and this community, et cetera, et cetera. So, I will answer, I'm just telling you I answered my question differently, and I'm not going to parse it any which way. At the right price, right project, I am interested in entertaining an offer. And the only way I can entertain that is if it comes to the board in writing, the board puts it on an official agenda, and we work through it. If by that time we haven't had a public process on this, we then have it before we schedule as the agenda item to entertain it. So the public process will be part and parcel.
But the problem with that is that that's reactionary, right? Like then you're reacting to an offer and saying,
Only
hey,
if we get one quickly, but
hey,
if
hey
you
public, what do
prioritize.
you want us to do with this? And so the point of this discussion.
You are always going to have a public
No,
process.
but the point of this discussion and why I think it's important for us to have this use discussion is because we as a board have never talked about what do we want to see this property develop into.
That's the
If
problem.
any,
That's
right?
the obstacle
That's
right now.
that's number
the
one,
obstacle
right? And then number two,
in this.
and because it hasn't been one of our board goals, we've got a lot of other things on our plate. We haven't focused on this, right? And maybe that's appropriate. Maybe we should focus on it. Maybe we shouldn't because we've got other things to do right now. But if we're going to focus on something right now, and we're going to focus on this parcel of land, then we need to have that outreach. Now, I don't think we should be doing this if and when we have an offer come in to see if it's going to be cohesive with that particular offer. We should instead be proactive and have the discussion now. What do you think is a proper use for this parcel? And then go out and survey the community, assuming that this is something that we want to spend our time doing. And that's an open discussion. But we shouldn't be surveying the community
But
when
Kevin,
there's an offer.
I mean,
that's
Mark,
come.
here is the reality of the matter. We can have the conversation with the community right now about what we might like to all see on that piece of property. The fact is, if in 2 months an official offer comes in, then we may have to have, I would suggest we always have it, we have community engagement then on the specifics of that particular offer, right? So one does not preclude the other. One gets us prepared and gets us all thinking in terms of comprehensive planning and all that kind of stuff. Always a good thing. But still, when that specific offer comes in, we would be very wise to have a public process on that specific offer to once again refresh and focus on that specific offer. So, I'm just telling you, I would entertain a motion to sell at the right price for the right project. Sandy, how do you feel?
I'm with Sam, I'm not sure I would use the word interested. The word I am open. If the right person comes in at the right price with the right thing, I truly don't ever want us to sell a piece of land without opening it up for as many offers as we can get. But we've already said we're gonna do that. We will accept the right offer at the right price. We've done it. We've done it as a town. Let's admit it. We've done it. And so for me, I will never say that piece of land is not for sale. It is indeed for sale. I understand where you're coming from, Kevin. It is not actively for sale. But if somebody comes in with an amazing deal on that piece of land, I want to hear about it. I don't want to just automatically shut down, nope, it's not for sale. Because we might kick ourselves in the butt that we just gave up something that was a really great opportunity. because it's not for sale. I'm also very concerned, I think we have got to move forward with engagement on this piece of land because we got so much misinformation out there about that piece of land right now that it's open space. We have got to really talk about it before it gets so far out of our control as a town that we can't fix it. And we'll do nothing but just tick people off because now everybody thinks, oh, it's open space. It's not open space. And we need to, it is zone commercial. And when we bought it so that we would control the destiny of that piece of land. We did not make a determination of what it was. It was still commercial when we bought it. And so I firmly believe we have to entertain any reasonable offer that comes our way. And if it's more than what we paid for that piece of land, to me, that's reasonable.
So can we talk about what the board actually wants to use this land for? I mean, because that's what the agenda item was.
Well,
Well,
there's two
there's
separate
two.
agenda items.
So back to the item that we started on, which is, does the town want to sell or keep this property? What Kendra was saying at the beginning was if we do not want to sell the property right now, then we have the option of keeping that item on the agenda for tonight's meeting or not. If we don't want to.
But we cannot vote here, and I don't care if you got 4 head nods or 5 head nods, we cannot vote here. We cannot say
Understand.
in this forum, we're not interested. So therefore,
you
we have to take it to a board meeting.
You actually can say whether you're interested in selling. If you're not interested in selling the property right now, then yes.
That's a vote.
That's not,
No,
that's what you're.
it's a general
there's-
direction.
Yeah, there's no voting on.
If that head nod is going to apply to a specific offer that we have on the table, it feels pretty close to entertaining that specific offer and saying no on that specific offer. I don't think that's sound ground.
I think it's on the agenda for tonight, so we just move forward. with
It's
the
counsel
agenda
from the
after
attorney and it's on the
Yeah.
agenda, so I don't know where it's, yeah. Sure, don't worry
Leave it
about
on the
that.
agenda, I mean.
I think leaving it on the agenda, I
Right.
don't think anybody's saying to take it off
Right.
right now.
I think that
because-
was what Clint was saying, is do we even
I
need to leave it
said
on the
it's an
agenda?
option. I said
Right.
it's an option.
It's an option to pull it from the agenda because no official response is required if you don't want to sell the property.
Mhm.
But how do we arrive at that official statement?
It's not official,
But then
we're
you
just
rely
gonna
on an
keep having the same
unofficial
argument.
statement that we don't want to sell the property.
Okay.
The property's not for sale. I mean, you've already made that determination by not listing the property for sale. There's no other action that needs to be taken. So,
I say leave it on the agenda.
it's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
All right.
I'd just like to make one more comment about that what we haven't really talked about yet, and I think will be important when we talk about the use of it. It's not just what the residents would like to see, it's also how we, as fiduciaries of the town, can actually get the most value out of that piece of property. So yes, we take the input from the residents and what they would like to see there, but the ultimate decision comes from how do we, or how does the next board actually get the most value and the most benefit for the town of Superior. And that might be selling it at some wonderful price, to somebody else, rather than holding it. Holding it may not be the option in order to get the most value to the town for that property. And we did take it out of our reserve. Remember, Clint, you and I had a problem with that when it was bought. We weren't on this board at the time it was bought. We had a very strong aversion to the idea of, as residents, sitting in the back, taking money out of our reserve to buy for a piece of property.
When there was no plan with it.
When there was no plan for it,
That
right.
was my point, was there was no plan, so you're buying something with no plan. But, now 4 years later, I do see the value in the decision that was made, and I support that decision. I think
Yeah, I'm not saying that
I
we
think it was
don't
a-
support it, but
I
I'm just
think it was
saying
a
that
good-
when it was bought, there wasn't discussion about
Right.
how you're gonna get value
Right.
back to the town for the purchase of the land.
Right.
Because we took it out of our reserve, bought it without knowing what we were gonna do with it.
Right.
And now that's the discussion we need to have. How do we get the best value for the town of
So
Superior?
the question is, so that's item D, possible uses for town 15. Do we want to get into that, or do we want to wait until we have a new board seated. My view is that's probably a better discussion when we have a new board seated.
Well, I think it's gonna take us all the way up to 5 o'clock and then longer if we do it now.
It will, and we've got other items.
Well, I would suggest that, I think talking about what we want to do with this will definitely take us to 5 o'clock and longer. I would suggest that I do want to prioritize this for calendar year 19. And it feels like as we enter into the budget season in the next couple of weeks, I would like to see, and then I think this is appropriate for this conversation now, we want to signal to Matt and the staff that they might want to budget for a community engagement process or some process to figure this out. And I don't know if that means hiring a consultant or doing surveys or whatever, but it can't be I personally don't want to make it a priority over all the important stuff we need to do in the next 2 months. But I do think it is, I think that Sandy Hammerly's point is excellent. Maybe there's some misinformation out there in the community. And so getting out there, number one, educating the community. This is not currently open space, but maybe one day it will be. Maybe one day it'll be this or that. And then two, but please, community, tell us what you want to do. And then to your excellent point as well, the third leg of that stool is the sitting board at the time needs to make the appropriate fiduciary decision around what it should be. So I think, so personally, I'd like to signal to Matt, yep, this should be, I'd like to put it on the committee agendas for calendar year 19 and would set something aside for a budget process that we'll talk about in a few weeks.
And relating into that, I want us to not just look at what residents want there. We need to look at what does it mean to the town from a standpoint of possibly providing some financial, if there can be commercial property there, if it can be, it is commercial, can it help our commercial diversity here? That's important. I mean, we have a very, very small percentage of our tax base that is commercial. And if there is some viability to putting something of that nature there, what would it look like? Because there are some residents that wouldn't mind that it's commercial. They don't want residential there. Or they don't, of course everybody wants open space. But, there is a financial impact of taking that completely out of service for the town. So I don't want us to just listen to, I think we have to think about the financial responsibility for the town that, we just could possibly give up another possibility of where we might put some it could even be a combination of civic space and commercial. So I think Kevin's right. We've got to address this in 2019. We can't let this float around for another year.
So the flip side of that coin is, we always talk about unintended consequences. As a board, we have not prioritized having a discussion about what to do, if anything, with this parcel since I've been on board. The impetus for talking about this is the fact that we received an offer, and that's why we're talking about it here tonight. We're talking about trying to clear up confusion in the public as to what this parcel could be used for, could become. By placing it on the next board's retreat in January and kind of elevating it to now something that we want to talk about, that's going to have some effect in the public, right? The public's going to think that, okay, now something's going to happen on this land. Whereas right now, the status quo is just, it's an unimproved parcel that is, yes, zoned for commercial, but it's undeveloped and it's owned by the town. If the board actually doesn't have a desire to actually, turn this into something, whether it's fields, rec centers, community centers, designating it as open space, I think we should be cautious in how we, message this and notice it and deliver it, because I think the fact that we're going to be listing it on an agenda and talking about it some more is going to, in and of itself, give the public some impression that there's going to be some activity on this land. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about it, but I just wanted to just throw that out there, that that is one of the things that I foresee happening, that the public's gonna react to it. And they're gonna think that something's coming down the pipe.
It's a really good point, Mark, but remember, do nothing is always an option, right? So,
And it's an action.
an action, so I mean, that could be, I mean, so I just wanna, I like you, we haven't talked about it, so I feel like the do nothing is the default action for this. And if we purposefully decide to do nothing, I don't want to signal anything, but maybe that's okay, but I think that's one of the possible outcomes.
Right.
If we purposefully decide that we should pursue converting this to fields or open space or whatever, that would be purposeful. My point is, I would like to propose that in 19, we prioritize and make something purposeful, or at least initiate that process. And do nothing is a purposeful, can be a purposeful action.
If I can make a suggestion on that, because I'm sure I won't be a part of those discussions unless I'm in the public, but item C on here is a discussion item for tonight, and I think that's going to consume a lot of time through the rest of this year and into next year. And Town 15, to me, whatever goes there is of low priority, whereas how we use $10 million in community space is high priority. And you might find in that discussion that you might want the Town 15 property for some kind of community space. So I would suggest that you make that a low priority and really focus on that, because if you put both of them on the docket to discuss, you're never going to get anything done. It won't get complete. So I would prioritize the most pressing thing, and that is the $10 million and how that's spent and how we allocate up to 40,000 square feet in town center.
The comp plan was last updated in 2012. My understanding was the comp plan is intended to be updated about every 5 years, which would have been 2017 or 2018. We have a new board in 2019. You guys should be considering pretty soon a review of the comp plan. When you do a review of the comp plan, the Town 15 parcel is going to have to be
That's right.
discussed in the context of that, along with every other thing out there. The cat's out of the bag here. It is wise, I believe, whenever the cat's out of the bag, to deal with it up front. Otherwise, it takes on a life of its own. So I actually support Kevin's this cat's out of the bag. There is extensive conversation and expectation in this community about what can happen there, what should happen there, et cetera, et cetera. So I think he's exactly right that confront that, deal with it in a positive fashion. I'm just saying that the comp plan update is a good, positive fashion to deal with it if you choose to put it within that context.
Can I do?
Okay. All right. Let's talk about let's do now Verizon small cell.
Kendra's been working with Verizon on bringing that forward. You want to give them an update?
Sure. So Verizon is obviously, this is not the only municipality in which Verizon is trying to deploy this technology. There is a group of metro area municipalities. Everyone is sort of negotiating with Verizon at the same time on a master, what they call the MLA, the master lease agreement, master license agreement, excuse me. And that would allow them to put these facilities in the right of way. That's what we're doing right now. I sent a draft back to Verizon. They didn't like some of my edits, so we're kind of going back and forth. And they've been consistent in not liking those edits with other municipalities, so they're not picking on us. So we're now the ball's in their court at this point, just waiting to hear back from them on the most recent draft that I sent.
When do you reasonably foresee actually having an agreement for our consideration and then a project like this actually getting started?
Project getting started, I'm not sure. It's my understanding that they deploy pretty quickly once you get an agreement in place. But there aren't that many places with agreements in place yet, so I don't know the answer to that. I don't know where they're going to prioritize the installation, if you know what I'm saying. So, but I would guess in the next 60 days we could have an agreement approved. I just haven't heard back from them in a couple weeks.
I just think that the amount of drop calls that we have in the town, I mean, this is one of those things that we hear from residents over and over again. The same thing with the Comcast issues with the project right now. It really affects everybody's quality of life on a day-to-day basis, and if we can do anything to kind of, expedite this and try to get them to, move us to the front of the line, the residents
yeah.
would really appreciate better service.
I hear you, and and we're just trying to make sure that, the town is protected, because these things go up in the rights of way, and then all of a sudden you get feedback from citizens saying, what just went up in front of my house?
Right.
So we have to balance those two things, because once we give them this master license agreement, they have free reign. I mean, we can approve different installation locations, but basically we're giving them access to all of our rights of way. So that's why we just want to be careful that we have good design standards in place so that they can't be too tall, too wide, too ugly, too close, all of those things. And that's what we're working on.
So how does this impact if AT&T wants to do the same thing?
And that's a really good point, because if we get a good MLA in place with Verizon, then when AT&T comes in or the next provider comes in, we can say, look, we have this great MLA. Verizon already agreed to it. Will you agree to it? There are going to be some minor variations, but we're doing a lot of that legwork now. So once this gets into place, the next one should be quicker and easier.
So is there a way that Verizon could come in, and because they've got to jump on it, then they can block AT&T from doing
No.
the same thing? So there's no way that they couldn't
Nope.
sit on every piece of land and then,
It's non-exclusive.
okay,
Now, I
so
will tell you that-
AT&T can
yeah.
come in and put in a small cell right next door to it?
Well, one of the things we're doing in this agreement is encouraging co-location, because that's the other thing you don't want is 50 of these per block. So you want to make sure you have facilities, and that's part of what we're doing with the design standard, is making sure that they accommodate more than one if possible. Now, if they come in and say it's technologically impossible for us to put one here, that's a process that they would have to follow to prove to us that they need a second one right next door, or that they need a second one on the same block.
And I think they also said that for each cell phone carrier, they have different spots in town. So Verizon may have a bad spot in one location, but AT&T's fine in that location, so.
Yeah, I just was trying to make sure that
Yeah,
if
no, it's a
somebody
good
is the
question.
first guy there,
Nope.
that then it doesn't screw up the people who
does not.
Right, but
have a different
I think that's a
sort of
good
thing.
question, if you could potentially co-locate, if you could require the carriers to co-locate on these eyesore towers. But personally, here's the deal, I personally think this problem's been solved, because I think people that move to a neighborhood and suddenly they realize their cell phone carrier doesn't work on their street, and they work from home, they ask the neighbors what they have, and they solve the problem. I know that's what I personally have done. I am not interested in additional, these things are horrible looking. I am not interested in seeing any of these additional things, and for the long list of complaints I get, and we all get when we go to the Safeway, yeah, dropped cell phones are one of them. This doesn't, to me, feel like a problem that I would solve. So if you guys can negotiate a master agreement that allows for co-location and it's great, I'm all for it. But just to know, as I'm on the board over the next couple of years, I'm going to be hard pressed to vote for anything that looks like an eyesore in our
What
right
are
of
you
way.
saying looks like an eyesore? Are
These light poles, these
light poles?
fake looking light poles, and they gave pictures of the most aesthetically.
That looks cool.
Well, yeah, that's in San Francisco. I'm sure we're not going to get
Well,
Well,
that's
San
they said
Francisco
that they
one.
could do that. They told us that the night they presented that.
Yeah, I personally do not, I think it's good that we're negotiating the favorable terms of a master agreement. I think our little community has a lot of, I don't want to say problems, opportunities where we could direct the community in a different way. Drop phone calls doesn't crack the top 10 for me.
Well, it does.
And I work from home.
Does for me, because while I'm just a few houses down from you, I'm at the bottom of a hill. And it's been very painful, but,
You need to get rid of your provider.
yeah, I
No.
think
Right.
I've got some problems, and I will talk to you
I
about
never
who
have
you
drop
have.
calls.
Right, yeah,
But
same.
I think, Kendra, it's great that if co-locate means that the same pole could accommodate AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, and Granny Cellular, or whatever
It
that one
does.
is.
Yes.
Great, if they could all be there. And the fact is, perhaps one can be put in right behind my house and serve everybody and not really affect the whole world at large.
But your provider won't put anything there.
Huh?
Your provider won't be putting anything on that co-location.
Okay,
You need to
well,
change providers.
Yeah,
I know.
right.
Anyway, so
All right.
yeah, the short answer is we're working on it, we'll get it done as quickly as we can, but we just wanna make sure there are protections in place so that these things just don't start popping up, and then you have more complaints from residents saying, what's this hideous thing in front of my house?
Right.
So,
And I just don't wanna make it so it gives them some sort of excuse.
no, it doesn't.
No.
Definitely, if they can have an
Good.
advantage, it's a good question.
And
They're all
they can't do
non-exclusive.
Since I
anything
don't
now.
use them,
We have to
I don't
approve.
like 'em.
Yes, because it's our rights of way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good.
We need to make it look cool. Give it to caps and tell them to design it.
Yeah, turn them all into little giraffes.
Yeah, little something, so.
All right.
Okay, that was easy.
Shall we?
I had just a couple questions on this topic. So we were talking about broadband, Verizon, and then also Comcast. So just an update on Comcast in terms of the construction and when they're going to be turning the switch on for the network.
We have an update on Comcast.
End of September. It could be a couple weeks.
They'll be done and on? Because right now they haven't actually turned on what they've laid. They've just laid new cable, right? The fiber optic cable.
And that's when Mark did an excellent, I forgot where you put it, but Mark did a really good public post saying, you haven't experienced the outage yet. People think they've experienced the outage, and what we've been told, the outage is coming when the switch occurs.
I got a thing on my door on Saturday, maybe.
Well, actually,
Friday,
some of us
Yeah,
have
that's- so
experienced
there's-
that.
there's-
We're down.
there's
for
two
a
outages.
day.
That's the scary
Oh,
thing.
There's,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
there's a geographically narrow outage, which is when they're tunneling through and putting in the line next to your
Right.
house.
Yeah.
And then there's the massive outage.
The
that's gonna
outage,
affect
capital
everybody.
O outage.
Right.
Did everybody get a thing on their door?
I did.
Well,
Because
see,
they've
we've
already
had-
done mine.
We've had 2 outages
Right.
now in the summit because they just, they kicked us off because they now laid the fiber where they had before
Right.
put the conduit in. Now, and the summit's been kicked out now 3 times.
Yeah.
So how
I
long
mean,
is this outage supposed to?
That's gonna be like a day.
Yeah,
Sounds like a
and
good
and
day
when it
for
happened in
Superior
Arvada, it
Days,
was
too.
almost
Yeah.
2.
Community out together.
Like I lost
Not be
service
online.
today. We lost service last week. And I went to Panera today so I could do some work. It's just, everybody's being inconvenienced, so I just want to make sure that we're still, I think Comcast did a good job of responding to us when we originally reached out to them, so I just wanted to make sure that we had
Yeah,
additional
until this,
information to
end
give
of
to the
Sep-
residents
end of September
because,
is when they're finishing up, so during the next couple of weeks, they'll be going out to individual homes and trying to, make sure that your service is hooked up to their new network. So there's a switchover going on, but they said September was the timeframe.
so maybe some additional messaging from Comcast just saying, we're nearing the end of the actual infrastructure construction and, the network's almost ready to go live, but when that happens, you're gonna.
I'm meeting with on Thursday, so
Yeah, because I think a lot of people are confused that, like, as soon as the stuff happened in the summit on Friday, everybody thought, oh, my service is going to be so much better on Friday. So they're not
Right.
really realizing that this is still another interim step. And so if they could do a better job of communicating, you're going to keep losing, and we'll tell you when you actually should notice a difference in your
You
service.
should really be upset
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah,
And
when you
then,
get the next
so
day.
my last question on this topic was, with respect to Louisville, have they made a decision? Are they going to the voters this fall?
They're not.
Okay.
I met with Heather Balser and their consultant that they hired to do the feasibility study a couple weeks ago. And it hasn't been presented to the council yet, their findings. But they're not having any ballot question for this November
Okay.
on this issue.
Thank you.
That's mostly just because they're not far enough along, is that?
Yeah, none of time.
It's a timing, and they're not sure, they, like I said, they haven't been presented the findings
Yeah.
yet, so they haven't had discussion of the council.
Okay.
So, and I'd say the same thing to you, Mark, that I said to Sandy. If you're having trouble, maybe you should change your provider. Because I don't have a
I
problem.
don't think
Come
he
over my
has
house and
mine,
work.
the same one, but we'll have to
Yeah.
touch base.
Yeah. For broadband, I'm talking about, internet access, yeah. I don't have Comcast.
If you live south of Colton, the experience with Comcast is much different than if you live north of Colton.
But I don't have Comcast. I was just saying different providers. Not everybody and I've not gotten anything on my door about any of this, and they took up our whole street for 3 days. And never once was there a thing on any of our doors. So I thought that was kind of interesting. They covered, basically the street with their equipment. We had only one lane to go through there, but then they left, and no, we haven't seen them again. Comcast.
Okay, we've got about 25 minutes. Are there preferences? Well, 25 minutes till 5, then we do dinner, and then we do Matt Berger, and we may have some time between Matt Berger and the end of the retreat. So, but is there a preference for B, C,
Oh,
or G on items to discuss things?
well, I think C is a big one, isn't it?
Yeah,
Should
C
we
is
have
a
a
big one.
conversation so we're kind of on the same page about that? That's a
Yes.
pretty big
Okay.
item,
Okay,
which also is part and parcel to B.
yes,
Right.
okay,
All
let's
right.
cover that.
And the question, I guess, the first question is, what was the result of the meeting with Atlante? That some of you had. Who had a meeting with Atlante? Okay.
The three of us,
And
yeah.
so,
I don't think there necessarily was a result, although it was good to open the dialogue, and I think at least the impression that I got leaving that meeting was that it makes sense for both Avanti, Ranch, and the town to work together to clear things up that are currently not particularly clear in the agreements as drafted.
that's clear.
Okay, so do you have a time, was there we're gonna get together again and talk? I mean, I think that would have been logical before you went into the meeting.
There was an expectation set, and Matt, I'm not sure, have you heard back from Alante on?
I have, we looked at dates in July, but his schedule was not accommodating, so, but I haven't heard back from him since
Okay.
that last communication with him, so. Kendra is working on an agreement related to Parks 1 and 2, but I agree, in our meeting, a separate agreement trying to clarify the cost sharing and development agreement was where we were headed.
So can I ask a question then? I'm sorry, is that, you have an update?
No, I don't think I have an update outside of the fact that just it wasn't just, let's have a cup of coffee and introduce ourselves. We did have a next step, and that next step has not yet occurred.
And I think part of that next step was also that we, and I'm using the royal we when I mean more me, I kind of volunteered to give some next step discussion points, which I haven't done yet. So, it's not necessarily
us?
to us and to Avanti.
Oh,
to kind
okay.
of-
And not surprising, but you would not be surprised that it was a little bit of news to them around they didn't necessarily have all the backstory.
They
So-
pushed back quite a bit.
Right, so for us to provide the backstory, not surprisingly, they pushed back a little bit around the expectation, and, I forget, I don't have my notes in front of me, but, they clearly are, from their perspective, that the $10 million is not conditioned until X bonds are released, and they have no expectation of those bonds being released anytime in the next, I don't know my notes, but I'm gonna say year or so.
Oh, more than that.
Right.
Because they got $50 million. They're gonna make sure that the next level of bonds
Yeah.
doesn't get you to $50 million.
Right.
So, we've had this discussion, a couple times before, and I was the one who asked, this particular agenda item, kind of in the manner that it was made. And one of the reasons why I asked it was, in some of the community discussions that came up related to the Town 15 purchase, there were statements made and questions asked by residents with respect to what's exactly happening in the town center, what are the commitments from the developer, how much space are we gonna get? I know there was a 40,000 square foot number that was used in prior board meetings. Going back to the documents, I haven't seen actually where that number came from, so it was.
As a max?
It was an up to.
Up to.
Yeah, and I don't know where that number actually comes from. I haven't seen it in any of the documents. So looking at the cost sharing agreement, just briefly, section 16 transfers the obligations to construct the civic space to the developer. In September of 2014, the town sent a letter to Ranch, made that election to have, or Sura sent the letter to Ranch with respect to the Block 6 election for the construction of the civic space. Randy Goodson had agreed to extend that notice provision up through October 1st, 2014, in a June 2014 meeting. And under the cost sharing agreement, under Exhibit B, it says that the developer shall contribute $10 million to civic space, which obligation may be met by the construction of civic space by the developer. Not
A
including-
portion of.
Right, but not including the grading work, and that would include, potentially a town hall, community rec center, library, public parks, multipurpose fields. And then under section 16, it says that the parties shall cooperate to agree on a cost estimate on the public park improvements and shall cooperate to coordinate the timing of the construction of civic space. So, reading all of those things, it doesn't answer, is this actually going to get built on block 6? How much space are we going to get? And if we have this up to 40,000 square foot, where exactly does that come from? And this is a question that I have for people who have been on the board longer, because maybe it's just one of those institutional knowledge things that I just wasn't privy to. But I couldn't find it in any of the documents. So I want to be able to say to the residents, this is what we reasonably should be able to expect we will get in the town center with respect to the commitments. I know we have this $10 million commitment, which can be used to fund any number of things. We also have this commitment that it at least could be used in block 6 for the purpose of construction of civic space in downtown. And if so, how is this all going to shake out?
Right, and the muddiness of this is that, is it 10 million that we get to determine how it's used as a board? Or is it whatever's left after the parks are built, which is what they believe it to be? And it says here even.
Or is it Exhibit B and then split to 4 and
Exactly,
6?
does it split Exhibit B in line, whatever it is, between the 10 million between 4 million and 6 million, and then up on line 10 of Exhibit B, that there's another 6 million for excavation of parks. And so we've got all this, we have this 6 and 4 and 10, multiple places in multiple spots. And it's very confusing. And even here in the letter from September 26th, it says, under section 16 of the agreement, SURA may elect to have a portion of this obligation. I assume this obligation is the $10 million.
Yes.
Because it doesn't define it.
Yes.
Met by RC Superior constructing civic space within block 6 of the project. So we don't define how much. We did that on purpose, not to say how big this space should be. But if we chose to go forward with block 6, which is where they wanted it, the developer wanted it, not necessarily us, that's where the developer said they would give us the land to build upon. And so then there's a conversation that isn't clear. Do they provide us the land at no cost to us and use a portion of the $10 million, which now has been even segmented further between 6 and 4. So use a portion of that money to build the building. And then we're supposed to use our money to actually, according to the Exhibit B, use it to, what do you call it when you fill out the space?
Amenitize.
Huh?
Amenitize.
Yeah, you put the amenities and you put in all the interior stuff. And so it's very confusing, and we really, I think, need to get back to how much money are we going to get from them? And I don't care, I do care. How much money are we going to get to them to use for civic space within downtown Superior? We need to get to that number, because right now we don't have a number. Randy Goodson, before he left, said you won't have any money left after you pay for all the public parks. Wait a minute, $10 million is not supposed to pay for all the public
Bill
parks.
says that too, right?
And Bill said the same thing. He didn't say, he thinks RC Superior had this commitment, but none of the rest of them have it.
Because
that
it
are
says
surviving.
the developer, so I'm looking at section 16 of the cost sharing agreement. It says,
Mhm.
it says SURA and the developer will cooperate, right? So that's an agreement to agree, so it means nothing. Will cooperate to agree upon the cost estimate for the construction of the remaining public park improvements.
Yeah. Yeah. so-
And then it goes on to say SURA and the developer shall cooperate to coordinate the timing of the construction of the civic space.
Right, so what we have is that there isn't any, okay, how much of the $10 million is for civic? How much is going to be for parks? We need to state that, at least from our perspective, what we think it is. And then that's when you have to start having, you all have the negotiation with the developer. Because right now, we have nothing, we have nothing from them, other than they've used up all 10 million for parks.
Well, we don't have enough time today to actually flesh out some of your questions. They're all good. But it seems to me like there should maybe be a working group. We'd have to post where you can pick the brains. Two of us are leaving, and we can certainly add anecdotal information here about what we felt the intent was, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the incongruity between development agreement and cost sharing agreement, all that kind of stuff was noted on tape during the series of 9 meetings between June and August of 2013. And those tapes should be watched, especially that very last one. When was cost sharing agreement considered?
October of 2013.
It was agreed to
Right.
approve in October.
When that cost sharing
2013.
agreement meeting needs to be watched, because a lot of things were articulated in that meeting. I voted against the cost sharing agreement for a lot of very specific reasons that go to these questions you're asking. And so I recommend you go back to the original, watch that meeting, and I think you'll find some of these things addressed. I'm shocked that 40,000 was never quantified in a written format anywhere.
It might be, I just
Yeah.
can't find it.
Okay,
I
well,
don't know
and
where it
that
is.
might help you, but definitely this language in that September 26, 2014 letter in which we elected this, when Matt wrote, or somebody wrote here, it's signed by Matt, Kendra probably wrote it, by this letter, comma, Sura so elects. That language was very specifically selected because we didn't know and did not want to commit to where in that 0 to 40,000 or 1 to
Right.
40,000 square feet we wanted to fall, right?
Mhm.
So the language was deliberately ambiguous. We want some, but we're not saying how much at this particular point in time.
And most of the conversation was around 20,000
Right.
square feet,
So,
not even the 40,000.
That is
so-
why that language was very specifically picked. But anyway, I will actually have to go back and watch that cost sharing agreement meeting, because it was pretty heated and long and important and painful, very, very painful.
There were 6
Anyway,
attorneys out there
yeah.
to our 1 attorney.
So.
No, we had bond counsel, because bond
Well,
counsel
you had
drafted
bond
this
counsel,
agreement.
yeah,
I
but-
didn't draft this agreement, bond counsel drafted it, so we had bond counsel here too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, I think, part of the
But,
confusion.
Right.
We were sprung this 6 million versus 4 million split at the end
Mhm.
of a very long, months-long process. It just appeared in that final week, and it's like, where the heck did this come out of? And so unfortunately, we had to deal with it because it was what was on the table at that particular point in time. So yes, it's less than perfect, but a
And the
lot-
definition
Yeah.
got parks inserted into it in the cost sharing, which was not in
In
the
the development
original
agreement.
agreement. So parks got thrown in there too at the end. So this got changed in its.
Civic
in its-
space was civic space, not parks included,
Right.
until that final thing when they
Mhm.
threw it in there.
I also worry about this. I mean, I was participatory to the process, but obviously not as close to the people that were on the board. And I do worry that we are going to lose some of that tribal knowledge that you all have from that 2013. I mean, the documents are what they are at the end of the day, but they are unfortunately ambiguous. And having, or I don't want to say ambiguous, but there's some debate about what it says. But having that history around how those documents evolved to, for example, the 6 million, 4 million split was an 11th hour thing. I do think that's an important history, and maybe you would be kind enough, as we have 3 new elected officials in the next few months after the transition, also, hey, let me, as a citizen, tell you, you can do what you want to do and how you want to vote, but here's how we got here. Because I agree, we're not getting that 10 million anytime soon. I personally am not supportive of taking the 10 million without some clear direction. So I wouldn't take any of the 10 million for any parks today without knowing how much is going to remain for the more traditional civic space. But again, I'm one of 7 on a board, and I know not everybody agrees. But yeah, it does concern me that by the time we might be ready to talk about something in Block 6, the 10 million, according to Ranch Capital, may be at 0, which reinforces where we started. The guys from Ranch did agree, from Avante, did agree that this uncertainty is unhealthy in the partnership that we've established. And it was a very collaborative conversation saying we should try, there shouldn't be, if we're going to be partners and we're doing this for the next 20 years together, let's not have this thing that is introducing friction between us.
I'd like to hear what Matt says about that, but my understanding of that 40-60 split is just, we requested those estimates to be put in there. So that was the estimate that came up. But we could spend that money on 70-30 if we wanted to. If we want to put 70% into parks or 70% in the civic space, we could do that. It was just an estimate. So my understanding, and Matt, maybe you can confirm this, is that we're not held to that 60-40 split. We could go 90-10 either way.
That is actually on camera, that this is not, and if you look at Exhibit B's title.
Exhibit B's title is where you get.
It says
Probable.
proposed or possible. Probable. So that's what we were told, is don't get hung up on this. This is probable, it's totally changeable, et cetera. It's not written in stone, et cetera, et cetera.
They'll bring up the guidelines.
In pictures, in pictures. They'll do pictures.
What's your
Pictures,
understanding of that?
pictures.
Yeah.
I know we've had this discussion multiple times.
Just exactly what's been stated, that it's probable cost estimates, construction cost estimates.
So it could be 50-50 or 70-30 or.
Yeah, and it's pretty typical for an agreement like this. You put probable cost estimates because at the time you have no idea what it's
That's
actually
right.
going to cost.
Right.
So,
But nor do we know what we're going to put anywhere.
I think when we're looking about this, we can easily get kind of lost in the minutia and what does this sentence say and what does it actually mean. But if you kind of step back and you look at, you've got the development agreement and they've got obligations to actually build the whole thing, right? And then the cost sharing agreement says this is one way to pay for some of it, right? But in exchange for the town and SORA allowing them to have this tax incremental financing, they need to give some of that back to us. This was not intended to be just a giveaway of $10 million to defray their obligations to construct all the parks. They needed to construct civic space as well based on our needs and wants, right? I mean, so they can't unilaterally say, the $10 million is gone, we use it on
No, they
Village
can't.
Green.
No.
you know?
Which is what they're trying to do.
Right,
But-
and
but that's what they're trying to do.
that's why we need to make sure that we are adequately policing this with each application that comes before us to make sure that they are not saying, well, you actually did agree to it because when we brought forth this application,
Right.
we said we were going to be seeking to credit some of these park construction improvements against the $10 million.
But there's a very important word about mutually agreed upon. There's a clause in there,
Right.
mutually
Right.
agreed upon. So that means they just can't go.
Well, no, they come to the board and we
Yeah, when
vote
you-
on it, then it's
when you
mutually
vote on
agreed
the,
upon.
yeah, that's what they would say, is when you vote on the application that's
Right.
before you, and
Right.
it includes a reference that whatever those improvements are go towards the 10 million, that's your agreed upon.
In
But
that,
what it-
Yeah,
in that
but even though we
particular order.
didn't, but we don't see a price.
Right,
Right.
and here's what I want to throw out
We have
there,
an estimate for
just to be
public improvements.
documented, is this
Yeah.
inflation adjustment
That's
or
right.
non-inflation
That's right.
adjustment. They can't have it both ways. They say, oh, we didn't have an inflation adjustment in there, but on Village Green, which is now testing this, their estimate came in higher than the estimate that they originally had for it. And they want that whole inflated cost to come out of TIF.
Right.
And
And the 10
probably
million.
the 10 million, right?
Coming out of the TIF is
So
fine. It's
they
the 10
can't,
million.
yeah, they cannot, out of the 10 million, sorry. they cannot have it both ways and say, oh, there's no inflation adjustment on the total 10 million, but oh, by the way, we're going to erode it much more quickly than anticipated by subtracting inflated costs from it.
And that's a really good point, Sandy. And that's kind of my hope with the discussion with Avanti and kind of this discussion going forward. And I just want it to be top of mind because, I want to make sure that, the town is getting, what it bargained for here, and that we're not going to get shortchanged. And, I agree with Kendra that, to the extent that they submit an application and it is like, oh, this is a $2 million park and we're going to credit it against and we approve it, well, then it's been mutually agreed upon. I don't think that that's in keeping with the spirit of this agreement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what would be, I think, beneficial for both sides is to just get around a table like this and say, okay, these are the parks that need to be built under the development agreement. These are the wants of the town, whether they're parks, civic space, or something else. And how are we going to allocate that $10 million? Because the $10 million is not going to be sufficient to build it all. But
We knew that,
it
though,
can't be
too.
used as a means to give a giveaway to the developer to the detriment of the town.
Right, to satisfy their obligations to
Right.
develop it, and then leave us sitting here without the opportunity to build this civic space. Originally, even the $10 million was not in the TIF. It was a $10 million gift, so to speak, from the developer. It was not in the original discussion. When it was first presented, it was, we'll give $10 million.
But that changed.
And that changed.
Mhm.
But, so the intent when they first started was that the developer would provide a civic space, which might even include a town hall.
I
That's
didn't
where it
know when it
started.
changed.
That's where it all started.
I'm appalled it changed
Yeah.
because that was really one of their lures
Mhm.
for us to want to do business with them is, oh, by the way,
We'll give
we
you
will
land
throw in
and build a $10
million.
million
And so now for
facility.
this 10 million, coming out of TIF and all that kind of stuff was a shock to me.
Mhm. So when we talk, I'm just talking about the historical perspective and the intent. The documents didn't end up that way, but that's how it started, was the 10 million was not on the side of coming from public improvements from TIF. It was actually coming from the developer themselves and providing something back to the town. And so none of the parks were part of that discussion. They were part of the development agreement and not part of this using the $10 million. So we've got a big hole, and I don't know if we're ever going to get any money out of them.
Well, I think what we need to do is, to have this kind of philosophical discussion about, what this money really should be used for.
Mhm.
Rather than doing it in a quasi-judicial formal application where there's, this application that's being proposed and we either approve it or deny it, we have a discussion and we lay out our expectations, they lay out their expectations, and see if they are actually we can find some sort of reasonable, middle ground there.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we're gonna have a situation where I think we're gonna have these applications just submitted to us, and then before we know it, they're gonna take the position that the $10 million is gone and we don't have any civic space.
The other thing that they're already chewing away on is line 10 of the Exhibit B, which is for parks excavation. And that comes up every month when we get the external auditor, engineer view, and then we put like the 35th approval of expenditures that can be considered recoverable under TIF. So we've spent part of, and I don't know how much of it, of line 10, but I don't think we've spent any of the bottom line yet of this 10 million. But we will, as soon as they complete Park 3,
Well,
Village
people-
Green, and it will,
Well,
once
I've
it
asked that
gets in
question a
there.
little bit before. I'd like, Matt, I would like to know, I've heard we have not spent, meaning expensed anything of this 10 million. How much have we allocated to be spent of the 10 million?
Well, when I first responded, we hadn't spent any of that. I'll go back and check. My assumption is we have. Now the Village Green Park is under construction. I'm sure that one of these reimbursement requests.
So I'm going to try to
Discuss it.
make
So we
it,
can-
I'm going to try to make it a habit for any application that I see before before me for Ranch Capital to ask that question and say, you know, what they do with the TIF, I don't care. But not that I don't care. I want to help them make appropriate decisions.
Right.
But I care a lot more about preserving that 10 million. And if the mutually agreeable language, we agreed somewhat unintentionally through the approval of an application, to Sandy's really good point, that doesn't even have a dollar amount associated with it, that makes me really uneasy. So I'm personally going to make that habit of just asking a question, and then I'm not going to, because I don't know if it can be a lever or not, but I'd like there to be some resolution, some final resolution around this 10 million, because I don't want to hear, it's just no longer
So,
available.
Kevin, I think we need to formalize this tracking and ask officially, Matt, in weekly digests, that any ding of anything against the 10 million needs to be in there to inform the board that that's happening. So we don't have a retreat a year from now and just happen to ask that and you say, yeah, half of it's been spent.
Right, I agree.
So I think that needs to be monitored on a constant basis, as does this inflation thing. There was a price attached to Village Green back in the day of the FDP.
There always
They're-
is. Every
They're the
public improvement
ones that
has a
delayed
process.
this. They're the reason that it's being built this many years out.
Mhm.
They're the reason for the increased costs and the inflation adjustments. And there is no way in hell we should be dinged for that inflated cost unless, in fact, the whole 10 million is inflated.
Or alternatively, you know, because this says that we're gonna cooperate upon the cost estimate, so if the cost estimate was, you know, $700,000 and they come in at 1.1, say, okay,
Gotta come back.
you can credit 700,000, you build the rest, that's part of your costs
right.
associated with the
Agreed.
project.
Right.
And then, you know, then we're not just a piggy bank for the entire
Right.
improvement, but, you know, we're holding to the cost. And then if that's the track that we take,
Right.
you know, then there's a reasonable understanding that, well, they should build these things sooner rather than later because it's gonna cost them more in the future and they're not gonna get
So
reimbursed
in
for the
Weekly
delta.
Digest, immediately, can we have the numbers about what it was expected to cost and what Bill Jenks thinks it's going to cost in today's dollars? Because this needs to be
You're
dealt
talking about
with
for Grove
immediately.
Street Park?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, if
This
we can get
needs-
back on the calendar with Avanti, let's.
Yeah.
This needs to be dealt with
Yeah,
because if
Ryan,
it,
Yeah.
what was it originally?
I don't know what
I
was
have
in the
Exhibit B.
FDP.
Oh, you've got Exhibit B?
Yeah.
No, but on the, oh, yeah.
In the as part of the FDP, they give a cost estimate. That, I don't know what that is.
I thought it was about 400,000. I thought
the
the last I heard it was 640,000.
Bid price that was accepted was 738,000.
Okay, there you go. And I think it originally was 400. And,
I think, I'll find that
yeah,
out.
you get the point.
I'll find that, yeah.
That
And
they don't
even-
get to,
And
they
even
don't
line
get to
10
cost
too,
over.
where the $6 million for excavation of all the parks, very specifically are identified for each of the parks. That too, I'd be curious to see how much of that has been approved by the outside engineer. Because I bet you all of that dirt that they moved out of Town Center over onto Park 2 probably went against that allocation for excavation in line 10. If it didn't, I'd be very surprised, because I know the original creating of the first pile of dirt that they had in there, and then they threw some seed on it, and then it didn't even work, you know. The first big pile of dirt there, that went against those excavation costs, and putting up black paper and everything to keep water or mud out of the Cold Creek itself went against that amount. So the question is, when they do something that is not really creating excavation for the park, why does that go against that amount, you know? And like I said, the big pile of dirt that they moved out of off of Main Street and dumped on Park 2.
That grading and excavation stuff is all in other line items. It
Yeah.
is not in that line item.
It's in line 10.
If you go to
of
line 10.
Exhibit B.
Right,
Exactly.
again, we're going, those are probable costs, and there's no specific limit on those. in
Okay, so
the
there isn't a
agreement
limit,
itself,
once they
right.
get past it, but there is a limit on the amount of TIF that they
Sure.
can actually take.
So they're just using more of the TIF to do this other stuff.
Oh, okay, right, because
But-
the $110 million is TIF, that's it.
Right, that doesn't change, but they can
No.
allocate it, if they wanna allocate more of it to grading and seeding, we don't have a specific,
Okay, all right.
the 10 million is different, because it's related, it's
But Kendra, what
discussed in the
isn't
agreement.
different is the earth, it was understood that there is a huge amount of earth movement that has to happen, get this thing graded so that a park can be built, right? Whatever earth movement is required is outside the actual cost
Yes.
of the park.
Yes.
as
Agreed.
defined here.
Right,
Agreed.
Right? So I don't care if it costs them zillions, right?
Right.
That's from somewhere else. That
Still-
is
It's
not.
still TIF, but it's
Yeah.
not 10 million.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
Okay.
it's 5:05, good discussion, and I support and appreciate Kevin and Mark and Matt's meeting with, or continued meeting with Vermonte. I do think that's a good approach and a good way to try to keep a handle on this. So appreciate the efforts there. All right, let's break for.
Quick break, grab some food, come back?
Yep.
Okay.
You want to bring the food in and continue?
Sure.
I
Or
think
you want
so,
me to-
because we got a couple of items that we could
Yeah.
cover when
Yeah.
we're
Yes.
chewing.
Good. gets here. Open space, we'll do G.
So I asked for this one to be put on the agenda to kind of capitalize on some of the discussions that we had recently. Tracy Kohler's meeting has met with Matt and Patrick, I believe.
Yep.
And specifically because she had originally reached out to the Trust for Public Lands, made that introduction to OSAC, and then Trust for Public Lands met with Matt and Patrick. It just seems like we're leaving potentially money on the table here with these relationships with Great Outdoors Colorado, with Trust for Public Lands, that they are looking for partners to help preserve open space lands. And if we're not actively looking to leverage those relationships, they're going to go elsewhere and they're going to work with somebody else, and we're going to be leaving money on the table. So I just think that in particular, while Tracy's got the energy and enthusiasm for this relationship, we should be doing everything to support that relationship. And then kind of secondarily, as the OSAC liaison, OSAC has made recommendations to the board. It's been a while since we've made an open space acquisition. And I know that there are certain parcels that have been prioritized that may not necessarily be available, but I wanted us to have a discussion as to what is the board's feeling on making an active effort to actually go use that open space fund and acquire some open space. The Town 15 parcel could be in that discussion, frankly. So then there's a number of other parcels on the OSAC's map. What I just don't want to see happen is to see us continually add to the coffers and then lose opportunities to actually deploy those funds for their intended purpose. So I just wanted to open it up to the board to have a discussion of, do we want to make it a priority? Do we want to actually direct staff to see, what we could actually do in terms of making some open space acquisitions? Because OSAC has been working really hard to update their recommendations, to update their maps, and I don't want that work to be just an academic exercise. Like, it should be actually something that we're using to preserve what little open space land we have left. Because frankly, we've got a development application on Anderson. There's something coming down the pike with Zaharias at some point. We're going to be losing these opportunities. So if we're not actually proactive and trying to acquire what remaining open space is available, pretty soon we're not going to have that opportunity at all.
Matt, what do we have coming on Zaharias? Is the same developer still engaged in just updating?
It's timing-wise, it'll probably be first quarter of next year. That would be before the planning commission and board at some point.
So are we still held that we can't comment on that about other options for that property?
Yeah.
Even any of it around close to Hudson Harris Reservoir or anything like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Mark, I think it's great. First, I think it's wonderful that the introductions have been made, the conversations have been initiated, but without having a specific property that we're targeting, I don't know how to bring it in to that conversation. If it was, okay, we're going to target Town 15, and we want to come to these folks and ask for them to pony up some amount of money, that feels like a conversation. Otherwise, it's just, of course we want to, we don't want to leave any money on the table, and of course we want to consider that. So if the question is, would we want to consider partnering with other entities that have a charter to invest in open space? The answer is unambiguously yes.
Yeah.
If the question is, do we want to go to them with a specific piece of land to acquire, I'd be supportive of you know, I don't know where we are with the, what we refer to as the level 3, you know, we'll always call it the level 3 property, even though CenturyLink's had it for a while. You know, if we've re-engaged with them and get their appetite, you know, that might be a good, because that's a giant number, right? That might be the one to talk to them about.
Yep.
So,
And that one has remained at the top of the list, and we have, Matt and I've met with them twice in my tenure as mayor. The last 2 years, one of the years was their transition to CenturyLink, and then most recently we reached out to them, and it looked like that they might be interested in looking at something, and then they came back and said, no, not going to do anything, not going to talk about it.
so maybe, if, you know, that remains on the top of the list, so maybe we go to these groups and say, you know, let us, you know, have we shared with them their priority, and given, you know, what would be the type, is this the type of property you would like to preserve as open space? And if so, you know, would you be, can you help us with our pitch to go back to level 3 CenturyLink again to say, we're ready to prioritize this and we'd like you to do the same?
Well, that's what Matt and Patrick reported when they met with the Trust for Public Lands, is that the 2 parcels that they are, you know, particularly interested in are Zaharias and the CenturyLink property.
No, to the extent that they can kind of go at it at a different angle than we're going at it, I think that's.
Right.
And I think that was one of Tracy's point also, is that, you know, if, and I think it was a really good point, because if we're just being reactive and we just wait for things to happen,
Always lose out.
things are gonna get developed. What TPL and GOCO do is they proactively reach out, negotiating on behalf of their partners, you know, municipalities and counties, and help, you know, corporate, you know, landowners kind of see the benefits of, maybe this is why you shouldn't develop this parcel and why you should actually dedicate it. And so, you know, I want to make sure that that's on everybody's radar. That's something that, you know, Tracy has volunteered to do, and I think she's a perfect person to do it. And I want to make sure that, you know, we continue to, you know, keep our foot on the gas, you know, so to speak, with respect to those opportunities. Because if we just sit back and just say, like, it was great we had this introduction, nothing's going to come of it, and at some point we'll see buildings going up on it, and that'll be it.
So a couple things, absolutely agree regarding level 3. This should be proactive. We should be doing whatever we can with TPL, public, whatever it's called. Is that what it's called?
Trust for Public.
Trust for Public Land, to jumpstart something. If we wait until there's an alternative offer out there, an alternative use on the table, et cetera, it probably is too late. So I think this is something to start immediately with level 3 particularly. And 2, I'd like to discuss why is it we can't include a delegate from the Open Space Committee, since this is an initiative that they identified, et cetera, when staff meets with TPL, et cetera. So if that's the chair, or if they designate Tracy or whoever, it seems to me that's just sort of good process.
Well, I made that request to Matt. I don't know if I copied the board, but I asked if Tracy could be included.
Can she?
In that, and you said yes, and
Oh, good.
they're going to, and they already
Okay.
met, right?
Yeah.
You guys already met.
Because in fact, they're more, you know, I think it's great that they actually became aware of this and brought it this far, et cetera, so. And then you as liaison, or whoever the liaison ends up being with the next board, et cetera, should be aware and attend if you're available, type of thing. So, totally supportive.
And I,
Can we encourage them to speak with the Zaharias family? I mean, it's not us going to them, but if TPL is interested in doing something there, because I think it's a great idea. So that's.
Come drop.
Sorry, I wasn't participating. Go ahead, what was the question?
TPL has said that evidently that their priority would be level 3 and potentially Zaharias property.
Right.
What would prevent TPL from going to the Zaharias family and say,
Nothing.
Agreed.
But the question was, but you asked the question, Kendra, a little differently the second time than the first time. The first time, respectfully,
Yeah.
the first time you said, could we encourage, is there anything that would prohibit us from encouraging?
I
them
did,
to
I
go to
I
it?
rephrased the question.
You did?
Yes, intentionally, yes. That we're not actively seeking,
But
TPL can go to them.
TPL can reach out to them and see if there's any interest
Right.
for it. Because they're separate, it doesn't matter what's pending and
Okay.
what's not, so that's
So-
certainly permissible.
question about open space then. If TPL goes out and does their thing, meet with whoever they want, including level 3 and maybe the Zaharias family, and there's just no deals out there. We have nothing else on the table. I brought this up before, what is the possibility of, I mean, do we see a value in having the Town 15 property stay as open space? And maybe we develop it to look more like natural open space. But we have the open space fund, purchase it from us, because there is a value there to us, and we've already established that. So I think that it does, it sounds funny, but I think we have to have the purchase done, but then use those funds then to pay for other parks, like Parks 1 and 2. I think it's a win-win for.
I think it's a great idea. I remember when you suggested that, because, I mean, right now we own that property, but we owned it to prevent the imminent development, and it's zoned commercial, and this is one of those things that we would discuss when we talked about the possible use, but, you know, I think if we've got the money in the open space fund and there aren't other opportunities for us to deploy that to actually acquire open space, and if the board thinks that parcel should be open space, I don't see any reason why we can't use those funds to basically pay for the dedication.
Secure the open
To secure
space
open
in
space
perpetuity.
forever, and then,
Yeah.
you know, then those funds go into the general fund and can be used for whatever else the
You
town
can use
needs
for a
that fund.
fund that Ranch Capital would have to pay back to develop Parks 1 and 2.
Mark, separate but related as the liaison to open space, why is the now vacant land on South Third Avenue not a priority for them? 7, do you know, or 7, maybe 8 lots on
7
South
ranch.
Third?
I don't know, it hasn't.
There's a
been-
beautiful
yeah.
piece of land, it's right next to the creek, I mean, if it's not their priority, it's not their priority, and that's what we ask them to
Yeah,
volunteer for.
it just hasn't appeared on the map, but it's certainly something that we could bring up at the.
I would love to hear
next
their
meeting.
opinion about it.
Sure, that's a good idea.
Trustee Ryan, there has been some recent behind-the-scenes dialogue between a handful of members about those properties. So I know, I think something's in the works.
Okay, be
In
cool.
terms of a discussion.
Thanks.
I'd like to transition to Matthew Berger with Brixmor. He's just arrived, and be respectful of his time. Appreciate you.
Sure,
taking
no
the
worries.
time to
Thanks
join
for
us.
having me.
For those that aren't familiar, Matthew Berger is Brixmor, who owns Spirit Marketplace, and maybe you can give a bit more introduction to the
Yeah,
group.
so I am the president of the West Region for Brixmor Properties. We own Superior Marketplace. So for those of you who don't know Brixmor, we own about 480 shopping centers across the country, primarily grocery anchored shopping centers. We're the largest owner of grocery anchored shopping centers in the country. I've been involved with Superior for 12 years through 3 separate companies, but it's really been the same management team. Though the letterhead has changed, the company has essentially been the same. And I know the ownership goes back before my time. I know the original developer sold it to a company called New Plan, who I worked for 12 years ago, but that predates that. So I did bring some information along that I'm happy to share with you. I didn't know how many copies to make, so I made a handful. I've got site plans of the shopping center, and then just some data that I thought you would want. This is all readily available on our website. We can pull consumer spending specific to a latitude, longitude. So we've got consumer spending reports for this property, as well as a report. This one you might find a little more interesting. It's hold on to a copy of this one. It's called our gap analysis report. This actually goes and breaks down spending by industry and by type of business, and kind of tells you what sales are leaving the market because they can't find it in Superior, as an example. So, for instance, if you look at this sheet, which I know it's going around, you can see within a 1 mile radius, there were, within the 1 mile, there was $1 million in furniture sales. Well, none of those sales happened in Superior.
Yeah.
They had to go elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
So within a 3 mile, there was an $11 million demand for furniture store sales. And of that demand, $6 million was met within that 3 mile radius, which means that 4.8 million was leaving the 3 miles to go find their furniture. So that's kind of how you can read this report. And it goes down segment by segment. And then this one gets a little tricky to read, and I apologize for that. But this will give you, it's kind of a retailer void analysis that we use as well. So, with that, just a couple quick high-level things on the shopping center. So for those of you who do not know, the former Sports Authority box is now leased. We have 2 leases signed for that, one with Goldfish Swim Schools and one with Stickley Furniture, who's relocating out of Broomfield. For those of you who don't know Goldfish, this is, as a company, our second deal with them. Our first is, I want to say Michigan or Minnesota, I can't recall. I wasn't involved with that deal. And I know they just recently opened, and the report I got was their first week, they were classes, there was like 800 kids signing up for these classes. So it should be pretty well received here, I would think.
Why did they move to the Sports Authority? I thought they were going to go into Sears.
The Goldfish?
Yeah.
Yeah, they wanted more space. They initially wanted the Sports Authority. We were pushing back because we had another deal for that box at the time.
Oh, okay.
And so we were actually the ones trying to move them to the Sears space. And then when we had a deal for one tenant for the whole box, and that kind of fell apart, and we pulled the plug on that. And so we went back and put them back in the box that they originally had asked
So those
for.
still retrofit part of that, where they'll actually build the pool and
Correct.
around it.
Correct. Yeah. It's going to be a little bit of a tricky construction job because we've got to make sure that none of the moisture or chlorine smell or anything else carries over to Stickley. But we can handle that. So we're dealing with that. So so that box is done.
When will Stickley come in? What do you think?
As soon as they can. So we actually had talked to them initially about even kind of opening up on a temporary basis, actually while we were doing the construction and kind of working around them. And they decided moving the inventory and everything wasn't really going to work for them. So, but as soon as possible, they want to get open. We did just open by the Wayne Smokehouse. They just opened this weekend. I don't know if any of you saw it, but there's a computer robotics school that opened. They just opened. We've got a waxing studio that is executed now, and there was what else?
Waxing.
Oh, waxing.
Waxing.
You were joking. Okay.
And there's a little
Are you
princess
surprised
day spa,
that
which if
Chris
you're not
and I can
familiar with
joke?
that, it's little kids, and they mainly girls. It's mainly birthday parties. They go and facials and get their nails done and things like that. So it's a pretty rapidly growing chain. So
Great Clips is vacating.
Great Clips is vacating.
And is
Correct.
Panera taking their space, or?
No, and the Panera was just actually sold to another franchisee. But no, they are not expanding into that space.
But they're not going anywhere either.
No, correct.
They're
yeah.
just a new franchisee.
New franchisee, correct. Yeah, this original franchisee was was actually one of the original Panera franchisees out of their hometown, out of Kansas City, but he just sold to them. I don't know if it was his whole company or just this location.
Well, based on this, if you, we hit home runs with these furniture stores.
Yes.
Based on potential.
Yes.
Here.
Yeah, and as you know, we don't own the
Private.
Ethan Allen. We did sell that piece of land to them years ago, so we don't own that. You know, as far as issues and things we are watching, obviously, we are paying close attention to Office Max with all of the office stores. That's still a risk. Mattress Firm is a potential bankruptcy, not a potential bankruptcy. It's a coming bankruptcy. It's just a matter of when. It's not an if, it's a when. Chances are it will be. Initially, they told us it might not be till next year. Now they're telling us it'll probably be after Labor Day. Labor Day is actually their biggest sale of the year. So it'll probably be right after that. So that is coming. From the initial lists I have seen, this one is not on the closure list, but that doesn't mean anything. I can tell you that Alta and Party City, who took the former Ross space, neither of them are doing very well. They're both struggling, and so we're trying to manage through that with both of them. Other than that, you know, we are working on something with Whole Foods in terms of a longer-term extension that we hope we can put together. You know, there are some concerns. I don't know if they're valid or realistic concerns, but we do certainly have some concerns that they could move across the freeway because there's going to be a number of boxes coming. There are now, and there's going to be some more across the freeway, but I don't think that would happen. This is a small store for them. 45,000 is probably the right size, but I don't. They've put money into this store, and I don't think that'll happen. And like I said, we're pretty close to finalizing something to lock them in for a longer term. Other than that, let me think, tenant-wise, Chuck E. Cheese had been a concern for a long time. We had been thinking they were not going to stay, and now it looks like they may. So we are actively negotiating with them. And that's all I can report on as far as current tenants. Certainly happy to answer any questions you have about any of them.
Can I ask you a question about your gap report? I just want to understand. So
Yeah.
the 1 mile radius, that includes Louisville? From here, that's not, 1 mile radius wouldn't just be Superior, that's,
1 mile, it's a 1 mile radius from the shopping center.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right,
So 1 mile, 3 mile, and 5 mile.
okay. That was all, thanks.
So, I'm Kevin, by the way.
Yeah.
Welcome, and thank you for
Thank you.
coming. Retail is changing, right? And you, I know this much better than any of us, in the concept of these big box stores. I travel when I'm not doing this. I travel almost full time for work.
Sure.
And so I have the opportunity to go to a lot of different grocery. What if I'm in, and it's never in a cool city. It's always in a suburb. And so I have the opportunity to go to malls and find the restaurants. If I was traveling and went into a mall, a shopping center like this, I would know that there just wouldn't be the type of restaurant that I'm going to want to go to. I'm going to pull in. I'm going to see the Mattress Firm, or and I'm out. I'm gone, and I'm going to go down the road and look for something else. Have you done? This needs some. In the next 20 years, you'll have to do some wholesale renovation, likely around this. Do you have examples of where you have done that in other communities? And as we're talking about how we could invest in, we've got some town-owned land on the other side of town, and maybe we'll sell it to the right offer at the right time. I'm not interested personally in selling that land for any price, because I see all the vacant land that you have, and so I would much rather partner with you to say how can we help you around tax incentives or financial incentives or anything, so your big box shopping complex looks cooler, so the business travelers, because we have a lot of hotels in this region, so you're going to get a lot of people that are staying in the new hotel across the street, or the Marriott across 36, or anywhere else. So suddenly they're coming to your store, and they're into your shopping center, and they're going to the furniture store and the jewelry store next door, and they're going to get a glass of wine and then ice cream, and all the money stays in our town and in your shopping area. How can we help you you're going to do it in 20 years, in the next 20 years. How do we do it? How do we help you do it in the next 3?
So there's a lot of things there. So first of all, to your point, yes, retail is changing, right? If you just look at this site plan, right, you took a Ross box and it's
Right.
now 2 tenants. You
Right.
took a Sports Authority box and it's now 2 tenants.
Right.
So there are certainly changes. We are, with that said though, where it's changing more, I think it's wrong to paint a broad brush that retail is changing. Where it's changing significantly is in the malls. And where it's not changing as significantly and as rapidly is in the open air shopping centers and the grocery anchor type shopping centers. Now with that said, we are seeing different types of uses coming into our centers on a broader stroke across the country, entertainment type uses. We're seeing trampoline parks being very active. We're seeing the health and the gyms being very, very active. And where 2 years ago I might have scoffed at a trampoline park, well, there's a company called Urban Air that the average Urban Air does $6 million a year in sales. You shouldn't scoff at that, right? That's a big number. So, and they are driving traffic and generating things. Now, from a restaurant perspective, that's a different discussion, right? Because you've seen in this center the problem with restaurant sales, right? You have a restaurant that's now a Verizon. You have a Buffalo Wild Wings that's closed. You had an Arby's that had lots of problems. You've had a Panera that's struggled. And it's really very simple. There's no people. Simple as that. And so when I hold this up, and it doesn't matter what else I do, when I hold this up and I have 3,200 people in a 1 mile radius, I'm not going to get a restaurant. I'm just not. And it's not only the rooftops, it's also the daytime. And so the restaurants really look for daytime because their lunch is just as important as their dinner. And if people have to drive, it's not convenient. Now, I say that, and absolutely Wayne's is the exception, right? He's done a phenomenal job. And I'd love to take all the credit in the world for that, but I'll openly admit that was the least I almost didn't even want to do, right? And so you just never know sometimes. But it's still very, very difficult to convince restaurants to go in. And I was just there. I just drove through and I do the same thing. I drive through and I say, where are the restaurants? Where's the food? Where's the draw for people to come during the day and congregate and have those open spaces and the patios? And we'd love that because that is what we're trying to do in our centers. Our goal, we are investing as a company $200 million a year right now on redevelopments with the goal in making some of our shopping centers that are not the most relevant area within the community to be the most relevant area in the community. That's what we're trying to do. I don't know the answer to this one yet, and there's a part of me that really looks at this and says, how can I incorporate a mixed-use component into here?
Right.
And what does that look like? Can I incorporate some sort of housing component into the shopping center? If I do, where's it go? How's it look? How's the connectivity with the retail play? I don't know the answer to that yet, and it's something I've been thinking about. And I've got a team in my office. I have 3 people in my office that all they do is redevelopments. We're looking. We have a center in Westminster that we're looking at a redevelopment on right now. Actually, of bringing multifamily into that shopping center.
So which center do you have?
The
What's your other inventory?
So the center, we have 6 properties in Colorado. I'd like to get to 10. The property we have is on Sheridan. It was where, unfortunately, we lost both Babies R Us and Gordman's.
Okay.
So we are looking at the building on the northernmost end of that shopping center that's now Golf Galaxy, Party City, and Dollar Tree. We're looking at actually tearing that down, converting that end of the shopping center to multifamily, and relocating those tenants into the Gordman's box.
Right.
There's too much box space, right?
Right.
To your point of retail changing, that's a perfect example. I would never build a center like that today with all those boxes, ever. Wouldn't even think about it. And so how can I make that center more relevant? That doesn't completely accomplish it because I think there's still a need for shop spaces in that center, and I don't know how to accommodate that yet. but-
So can we just, we have some time. So
Yeah.
Can you just talk about your other, so I'd argue that that's not a like example for us because you get,
It's not.
you get, you probably 80,000 cars
Yeah.
driving down Sheridan every day, or however many there are, maybe 50. We don't have the population for the traffic, so we gotta bring people in.
Yep.
So maybe some
So
TOD
I
or
don't,
something.
I don't have a like example to Superior, to be honest with you. I don't, and it's an interesting, it's a little bit of an anomaly, right? If we were sitting here 15 months ago, I just told you that our portfolio is about 480 properties. 15 months ago, I would have told you it's about 550. And those properties we've sold were properties that we would consider, or call tertiary markets for the most part. And when I say a tertiary market, it's a market that's got 5,000 people in it, 10,000 people in it. What's interesting is, on the surface of it, if you just looked at a piece of paper, you'd say, well, this is a tertiary market. Why is Brixmor even an owner here? But it's not, right? You're on a major corridor between Denver and Boulder. This is not a tertiary market. But the demographics kind of lean to the fact that it is. And so for us, that's a little bit of an anomaly. And so, yeah, we are trying to figure that out. We like to think we're pretty good at it, but as far as mixed use and changing what the shopping center is, that's not. We are still going through a learning curve on that, because we've traditionally been a grocery anchored shopping center owner. And so now we are looking at projects. I've got, just in the west, I've got forget about Westminster for a second because that's very early, but I've got 4 other projects that I'm bringing multifamily into. 2 in Texas and 2 in California. And it's new for us, right? And so we're bringing in people, we're bringing in third-party consultants to figure it out. It's not what we've done for the history of the company. So yeah, this one absolutely, I'm not gonna sit here and say, I have the plan, this is what it's gonna look like in 3 years. I don't know that yet. We're still trying to figure that out. And we would certainly look to you guys to be our partner with that. We're open to ideas. I'm not set in stone on anything. As far as look, this is a shopping center that wouldn't be built like this today either.
Clearly.
There's too much space. There's too much shop space. It's disjointed. It just doesn't work well. Doesn't flow well. I would never even lay this out. Forgetting about a city approving it, I wouldn't even lay it out this way.
Right.
And so, yeah, we are very receptive to hearing your thoughts and your ideas and seeing if that would work for us as well.
How many parking spaces do you have right now, and how many do you think you actually really need
Yeah,
for successful? And then is that part of your consideration for how a redevelopment might take shape?
Yes and no. So off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to the question. I can tell you that we absolutely have too many parking spaces, but I will also tell you that we do not control or own the parking fields in front of Costco and Target. They own their own. Those parking fields are part of their parcels. So if I'm going to touch those parking fields, I'd need to work with them.
So looking at the map, so if I were and I've been wanting to have this conversation for years.
Yeah.
So since I've been on the board for almost
Sure.
2 years now, so I'm thrilled about this. I like the idea of multi-use. I like the idea. I recognize the shopping center can't be successful when you don't have that many more people.
Sure.
It feels, I like the transportation-oriented development concept around Pad B, some of your most populated areas around where Office Max and PetSmart are. It feels, we obviously have residential directly across the street on Sycamore, and so if you brought in some multi-use or residential there, that to me feels like you could tear down those buildings and build some cool townhouses, 3-4-story unit buildings.
The issue with that is I just don't know if the depth is there. It might be. I don't know if the field, again, because then we start getting into a part that we don't own with Target, and so I don't know if the field is there. Off the top of my head, just on a quick look, if I could, I look at all that stuff in the middle, along the circle and along, all the, again, where Wayne's is and where the police substation is, all of those things, and I look. Could that be a mixed-use component with ground floor retail and multifamily above it, and kind of make it like a town square, like a center somehow? I think maybe, but I haven't put it to paper yet to see how that works. Again, we're just in the early stages of trying to think about that.
So how do we, I've been here 8 years,
Yeah.
and we wanted to have this conversation, so I share Kevin's
Right.
Kevin's joy quadrupled. How do we have continuing conversations with you and not do this once every 8 years?
I can have a conversation anytime, quite honestly. It's just, I
How
know.
often do you come here?
I'm usually here once a quarter, give or take.
Well,
yeah,
I would
give or
suggest
take.
the new board meet with him once a quarter.
Yeah, so-
You know, or twice a year.
Well, we meet annually in Las Vegas,
Yeah.
But I mean,
but
to
I
have
think
the
with the
whole
whole board
board,
is
yeah. The
definitely
whole
valuable.
board is the-
It's
Mhm.
definitely
Yeah, I
valuable.
mean, look, if there's support for doing something on a municipal level from a mixed-use component and a housing component, forget about what that looks like down the road, but just in the theory of doing that, I think we would entertain looking at that, absolutely. I think there's a part of me that says you almost can't go wrong building housing in Colorado,
Right.
right? So I absolutely would look at that.
So are you aware, has anybody made him aware of the Northwest Superior planning process?
Mhm.
Okay. So we have a
Shelley's been.
planning commission-led process. And I think it's going to really yield some encouraging results on this whole area up here.
Okay.
And so, you know, I think it's pretty exciting to potentially have you guys, depending on what the board, how the board agrees to proceed, to have
Yeah.
you guys really involved in that.
We've
Yeah.
also shared with him the ULI study that
Right.
also supported housing.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it showed a change of some of the streets, you know, to kind of take advantage of that center.
Yeah.
What I call the blacktop desert, you know.
Yeah.
That's in the center there that you talked about. That's always been there, never was well thought out from the
Correct.
day one. I sat here and remember talking about it. We sang Big Yellow Taxi, you tear down Paradise,
Yep.
pave Paradise, put up a parking lot. And that was years and years and years ago, probably before you were involved, and
Yeah.
there was a cow pasture back
Yeah.
there. So there's been a lot of people have been trying to figure out what to do with that center core that is nothing and never has been, and it's hard for you to sell. So
Yeah.
the ULL study changed some of the configuration. They also took advantage of the RTD land, which you don't own, but we could put transit-oriented development on top of, along with the center, what you're just
Right.
talking about. And I think there's some exciting things that can happen there for you.
Yeah, I mean, again, the disadvantage we have is we don't own a big piece of the parking. We have two big pieces. We don't own in front of Costco, and we don't own in front of Target.
So do
And
you have-
ULI took that into consideration, that they couldn't touch those two parking
Now,
lots.
But you
Target,
can also acquire it, too.
probably not.
Well, that's what, I have a question. Do you have other property where you have partnered with Costco? I mean, I think Costco is probably their own entity, and I know that.
Costco's gonna be very difficult to deal
Right.
with. Target I can work with.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like Target, you may be able to do something with.
Yeah, and I'm not saying I can't deal with Costco, Costco always owns. They don't ever, they're never a tenant. They are always an owner. Now, they don't necessarily always own their parking field like they do here, but they always own their building. And so we don't deal with them very much as a landlord. We have a very good relationship with Target. And Target has kind of changed directions. They're starting to see that they don't need these massive fields of parking anymore, and they're starting to, they even called a meeting with us in Minneapolis, and we went and sat with them and basically opened up the portfolio and said, look, we've got all these centers. Can you build something in front of our store to bring more traffic to our store? Can you put a fast food restaurant here? Can you do this? Can you do that at this location or whatever to help bring more traffic to our store? So they're starting to change their line of thinking. Now, when they own it, it becomes a different equation, but we can work with them on that. Costco, I just don't know. We don't deal with them very much.
No, maybe too late because we already have, we have a new medical office building across the street.
Mhm.
But what's your viewpoint around MOBs?
If we were going to do that, if we thought that was the highest and best use, we would probably entitle it and sell it, and we wouldn't build it or develop it. It's not what we want to get into. Now with the multifamily, again, that's new for us, but it's something that we would keep on our balance sheet and bring in a joint venture partner to operate it. We don't want to be apartment operators, but we would want to own it.
Now, operation can come, assistance here in Boulder County from the Bullock County Housing Authority. They actually, if you have a certain number of the units as market rate or, you know, low, not low income,
Yeah.
affordable
Yep.
housing, they would actually manage it.
Yeah, and I would just have to understand that more because typically, for us, it's very difficult to build them from a cost standpoint to make a return on that. It just
Okay.
depends. So the more affordable housing that we are required to do, the tougher it is to build it and make it, the economics work.
There's
But-
money from them
Yeah.
and the fact that they would manage the
Okay.
entire complex.
Yeah, something we would absolutely look
Yeah.
at. I just would have to understand the program more.
That's fair.
I mean, we're even getting involved in student housing. I'm building a student housing project, and we have a center that we own directly across the street from UC Davis. We're gonna knock down the whole center and build student housing, 500 beds above the retail. So we would look at seniors housing or different, so there are certain things that we would shy away from, but we would probably entitle and sell office. We have a project in San Bernardino that we looked at, that converting it to industrial, and decided we didn't want to do that, but we gave it some thought and we decided to sell it to somebody to do that. But we did give it some thought, so we will look at other things besides retail.
So you mentioned the Westminster on Sheridan. What else do you have up in northern area?
That's it up north. So then we have a property on 6th and Peoria in Aurora. We've got Parker and Arapahoe. We've got Monaco and Evans. And then we have a center in Arvada as well.
What's Narvada?
King Soopers Center. King Soopers, Goodyear.
Yeah,
Park.
okay, yep, got it.
Yeah. So we have an offer on one other center right now to buy, a King Soopers Anchorage Center. And like I said, ultimately I think about 10 properties feels right for us in Denver.
That's good.
Is that King Soopers one in Arvada, the one with the Kmart?
Kmart next to it, yes. Yeah, we'd actually looked at buying the Kmart years ago. We were going to move it to a marketplace store. We were going to move the Kings into the Kmart as a marketplace store. And then Kings decided not to do that, so.
But that is not urban renewal. That's not being, somebody said the other day that they were talking about knocking it down.
The Kmart?
The whole shopping center.
Not our center, no.
Okay.
We don't own the Kmart.
Yeah.
But the Kmart they are looking at a redevelopment of the Kmart. We were actually going to sell that center, and then decided that we think there might be a redevelopment play there, but not a knockdown.
Okay.
Kings isn't
No,
going
that's
anywhere.
actually great.
It's a really good Kings store. They're not
They
going
just
anywhere.
redeveloped on the other side.
Correct. Yep, and they added the Walmart caddy corner.
So, a couple questions.
Yeah.
Just kind of big picture questions. What are you most concerned about? What should we be most concerned about? What are you most optimistic about, encouraged? And then, what are you looking for in terms of a partnership with the town? And how can we help you?
Yeah. So I think the concern and the optimism is really the same thing. I'm concerned about the tenants that are going to move out. I'm always concerned about that, but I also always know we will find a solution. Hopefully that solution won't take as long as it did last time with the Sports Authority box. But I think the whole market, the whole retail was really going through a big change in the last couple of years, and I think it's settling down and people are finding their niche. But I certainly have concerns about Ulta and Party City and Office Max and even PetSmart to an extent. I have concerns at this shopping center about stuff I don't control. If Costco decides they want to do something else, if Target decides they want to do something else, I hate not owning big, large boxes in my shopping centers. It's as a landlord, that's very difficult because I could end up with a big vacant box that I have zero control over. I don't think that's going to happen here, but it's certainly something I think about. Probably more with Target than I do with Costco. But I'm always optimistic that I will find the right solution when that happens. It's just a matter of how long that's going to take. As far as your help, look, it's great that you guys support us trying to figure out some sort of development here that makes sense, that you recognize the same things we see, because most municipalities don't. So I think your support, if we're developing plans, for me, it's a partnership, right? If I'm developing sketches and ideas that, regardless of how much money I'm putting into them, that's not the issue. It's just sitting down and having an open dialogue about, well, what if we put this building here, or did this, or did that, instead of just, no, this isn't going to work. That's really all I need, quite honestly.
Good. We are anxious to encourage that and be a part of those discussions.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do, there's a gentleman in my office, his name's Andrew Gracie. Andrew runs my redevelopment team. I will have Andrew get with some land planners and architects and try to start figuring it out. Again, I like the idea of some sort of town square kind of concept in the middle. I don't know how feasible it is. I'll figure that out later once I see drawings and renderings and ideas, but I think that concept works because it starts to provide some sort of connectivity with the two sides of the center. And if we can really play off of that, then to me, I think that's the right way to go. And if that's something, again, we would need, I think we can avoid touching the land of Costco and Target, potentially, maybe not, but we would still need their consents to do it through, you guys, the REA documents are all recorded, you can see those, but I don't think that would be an issue.
I think the RTD lot and Pad B and possibly even Pad 8, that starts to become a pretty big area, and then you could even bridge over, pedestrian bridge over to.
Yep.
And then you could really start to get some.
Yeah, Pad B, I really like Pad B. It's just the size has been tough. Just hasn't, for some reason. I physically looking at it on a piece of paper, I like the way it lays out, but the size has been difficult.
Yeah. It's got good visibility,
Yes.
but it's also got excellent proximity to that BRT stop.
Yeah.
What is it? Clint, can you just sketch out what RTD owns? Is it directly?
It's that white area.
It's basically everything in white.
It's that white area between the roadway and everything.
And how much of that area is, like a lot of it is the detention pond?
No.
No.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong side.
Detention
Never mind,
pond is
you're right,
behind
you're
the
right.
old
Yep,
Sports
yeah, you're
Authority
right, you're
box.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's nothing in there, there's no reason why we couldn't.
And we've had, during the last couple of years, we've had developers look at that, but it alone was not quite big enough. And we're talking structured parking. And
Yeah.
They were looking at comps, everywhere else didn't have structured parking. And so by the time they structured the parking to return RTDs, the transit parking spaces there, it threw the numbers out of whack.
Yeah,
So
and
if
we haven't done structured parking in Colorado. My guess is, probably $18,000 or so, $20,000 a stall, somewhere in that range, I would think.
Yep.
Yeah, it gets expensive.
So if we could utilize some of this other parking and not have to structure it, maybe that's a way to
Okay.
get there. Or if the project becomes, I think you'll probably end up structuring it anyway, just because you've
Yeah,
got-
I would
RTD
think-
wants their spot. They do not want to move their spot. They want their spots.
Yeah, well,
right there.
I would think we'd have to figure out how to do structured parking somehow, if we're gonna add that to multifamily.
Right.
Now, across the street, none of that's multifamily, right? That's all owned housing. None of that's for rent housing?
Not yet.
Not
yet,
intentionally.
but there will be?
They think there might be, but
Okay.
there's nothing been proposed yet.
You're talking over here.
Yes.
Town center, yeah.
Town center, yeah.
Everything's for sale.
And right, and are you spending any time with them? Have you met with them
Not really,
when I know they're your competition and you don't wanna.
Yeah, it is and it isn't. Street level retail like that's a little bit different. It's a different, yes, there will be some, But I think with what we want to try to do here, I don't know if it's really the same competition.
Well, I think there are some pads there that would, you know, when you think about Lucky, the kind of similar Whole Food like grocery center, there would be, that would obviously, if we had another gourmet type grocery store there, it might impact yours. So having some, certainly can't hurt to have lunch with Bill Jenks. If nothing else, you know, you guys might be able to learn each other.
Has Lucky said they want to do that? 'Cause
No, not
Because
sharing.
Kroger has no money right now.
Not sharing anything like that. I just suggest,
Yeah.
you know, that's
You know,
obviously.
you know Kroger purchased Lucky.
No, I didn't even know that.
Yes, Kroger owns Lucky now.
So that's a good example of,
Yeah.
if we had a grocery store there and your grocery store, we don't
Yeah.
want to, you know, pay Rob from Peter to pay Paul
Understood.
type thing.
Yeah.
So having a lunch with Bill, I would personally encourage.
Yeah,
And I
okay.
think I don't know if we're done, but, you know, hear from at least, you know, you have a very flexible board in terms of tell us what you'd like to do.
Yeah.
Engage the community. You know, we're making significant investments around the planning commission to do this Northwest sub-area planning. You know, we have Heather Craycraft sitting in the audience. I don't know if you spent any time with Heather from our Chamber of Commerce. Spend time with Heather and get her ideas. Spend time with us. We'd love to have you back. Anything we could do to make this to make your shopping center successful. It's, you know, there are too many people in Boulder County that identify Superior with this shopping center, and it's just to your point, it's
Yep.
not how any of us would design it today.
Correct.
It's
Yeah.
this 20-plus-year-old design
Yep.
that we're sort of kind of stuck with. So it's going to be fixed one day.
Yeah.
Let's fix it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Matt, does Katie Press work with them at all?
Yeah. Yeah. And you shared the ULI report with me. I think I have that right.
Yeah. I can send it to you again if you.
Okay.
When we met in May, we talked about maybe new signage or signage improvements. Do you
Yeah.
still plan on
So,
doing those?
Yes and no. Yes, I would. I can tell you from some of the big redevelopments I'm doing right now, it's very expensive to do all of the signage that I think this center needs and to do it right with all the wayfinding signage and everything else. I don't know that I would invest that money until I figured out a larger redevelopment and do it all at once. Do that as part of the redevelopment, even if it's the first step of it. I don't think I would do anything that I would then potentially have to take down, is my concern. That'd be my only concern, just because it's expensive. But yeah, I think it needs it. I think it needs better wayfinding signage. I think it needs, just needs something. Liven it up.
Well, I think you should use this as a pilot for the plaza concept, in which all the small shops,
Yep.
the mom and pop shops are clustered around the plaza. Leave the big boxes on the perimeter and make it more of a destination rather than just a shopping destination.
Yeah, we have a center in Dallas, completely different because the demographics are, you know, it's 85 acres in the heart of South Dallas, so incredible demographics from a population standpoint, where we're kind of doing the same thing. We've got the boxes that are out on the outside. We've got this big area in the middle that is just wrong, and what we've done, we've signed leases with a movie theater and LA Fitness to kind of kick off the redevelopment, so we're kind of starting in the middle and going out. So same kind of concept here. I think if we start in the middle, because I think the middle is really, look, the center is more leased, I think, than it's ever been, which is good, but that doesn't mean that the center is right the way it is. So I still think the middle is the problem.
A thing maybe you're not aware of is we have a new committee in town called CAPS, Cultural Arts and Public Spaces.
Okay.
It's a placemaking committee. And they came to the board and asked for permission to research this concept of a cultural arts district.
Okay.
And the board gave them approval to proceed with that investigation. And one of the areas they're talking about situating this is in Original Town, which is the part that this Sycamore Street would overlook, et cetera, and of course just that whole vibe.
Yeah.
In Original Town, which then feeds into your vibe. Okay, and the thing about that is to not only make it It's to make it a place you want to be, visually appealing, exciting in terms of amenities. For example, one thing there's apparently a pop-up art gallery on Pearl Street Mall. I have not gone there yet, and it's apparently just super cool. So they've raised they've done some brainstorming. For example, the size of Sears.
Yep.
To actually do that as a pop-up art gallery. So to bring art and culture and visual stimulation and the cool
Yeah.
factor throughout, right? And energize it that way. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, that
as,
is,
you know,
that
there's-
is what we want to do,
yeah.
right? And so again, it goes back to relevance. And so he's 2 years and 3 months on the job. We have a new CEO, in fact, a new CEO, CFO, a whole new C-level group. But his mission is to make our centers the most relevant centers in the community. And so we want them to be the places where people are coming to. And hanging out and gathering and those types of things. And that's what's driving our $200 million redevelopment budget. And even on top of that, we just approved almost $40 million in spend. We have 4 regions like the West. It's basically broke down to $10 million a region in improvements to properties that aren't even a return driven. It's just, we don't have a tenant, we don't have anything, but this is the right thing to do for the property. We're putting new facades on, we're adding patios, we're doing all sorts of things. So we're really focused on community relevance and trying to do the right thing for the shopping center. So that's fine.
Well, for example, one idea thrown out is in all that parking, if you can have if the town can work out an agreement with Target or Costco, and I suppose we could, for a farmer's market or a farmer's market-like event.
Yeah.
That is somehow a little different than the other farmer's
Yeah.
markets, but so you energize
So
all
what
of this.
Yeah, what I would
once
say
a
here,
week.
because I actually love having farmers markets in my shopping centers. What I would say, it's going to be difficult here because of Whole Foods. But what I think on the same line of thinking you could do at the shopping center is, think of how a farmer's market's set up with tents and stalls and everything else. An art fair.
Right. We're talking
that's-
art fair or flea market.
Absolutely.
Art fair, flea market type of combo sort of thing as well.
So if there is somebody or a group that wants to try to organize that, I would say we would absolutely help with that and try to set that up. Even if it's not in our parcel, if it's in Target or Costco's, we would try to figure that out. Yeah, we have a whole team of people that it's what we call it our ancillary income. We're not leasing a space, but it's still something that we're leasing or doing something with. I press them all the time to bring me those types of events at the shopping centers, whether it's quarterly, monthly, whatever it is.
Okay, good. Well, I'll be excited to hear that.
Yeah.
Good. Is there anything anyone else has?
Yeah, Matt, when we were in Vegas, we've talked about it for several years now, but we revisited the idea of the possibility of a slip ramp up 36 into the marketplace. And it seemed like there's more interest in doing that now on behalf of CDOT, or correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we had those conversations initially with CDOT a couple years ago, and they were not in favor of doing that, but Alex is doing here. He works closely with the CDOT reps and he's re-engaged them about this, so, but.
Really post redo of 36, they're entertaining the possibility?
Well, Alex is having discussion.
Maybe for 20 years, one has to be redone again.
So,
Well, even if they're willing to discuss it now, before it's a flat out no, but I'd like to keep that out in the forefront. Maybe.
yeah,
It'd be a nice addition to the marketplace.
yeah.
That'd be great.
So as this Andrew Gracie guy
Yeah.
contemplates this plazification, because there was actually a New York Times article recently on plastification. Did you read it?
I haven't.
It's a cool article.
Yeah.
And if you can do it in New York City, you can do it in Superior. But as you look for a place to pilot this,
Yeah.
keep us in mind.
No,
It's a cool idea.
Yeah, I think it would work here, if it's done the right way.
Yeah, I'd like that to be put on a punch list to follow up with sooner rather than later, because my feeling is once you re-energize a little bit of this with the cool thought and cool concept, the rest's gonna follow. And we've got Ethan Allen.
Yeah.
The combination of Ethan Allen and Stickley really up
Yeah.
the panache here.
Sure.
And sort of using that, I mean, it's different than Dress Barn or something,
Sure.
right? It ups the panache. So build on that momentum to really, to add this cool factor, and I think it's gonna start falling in place.
Pat, where are you headquartered?
So our corporate office is in New York, my office out of San Diego.
So, on this shopping center looks worse on paper than it does in person, right? And which is amazing, and to think that it just doesn't reflect the personality.
Aesthetically, I will tell you, forget everything else, just pure aesthetics from the, call it 500 shopping centers we own. This is probably one of the prettiest shopping centers we have in the whole portfolio.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, just looks like a lot of parking. Looks like a lot of parking spaces to me. That's all I.
I can tell you, the Whole Foods with the stone and everything else is always predominantly featured on our website and our board materials, everything else.
So that's where I'm going is,
Yeah.
how could we help? I mean, it's great that this may look like a tertiary, we're glad it's still part of the portfolio of
Yeah.
properties and it didn't get sold off at the tertiary properties. What else can we do so as your board and your bosses are looking to make investments in communities, Superior is top of the list?
Yeah, I don't know. Look, you guys have spent the money on a ULI study, right, which you've shared with us, which is great. I don't know, other than just help from a partnership planning perspective, that there's anything I really need, quite honestly. I think we have personnel that either in-house or third parties that we can hire to help us come up with things that, as long as we can commit to constructively sitting down in a room together and saying what works or doesn't work for both of us, I think that's really all I need at this point, truthfully. And it's hard to get that constructive audience with a lot of municipalities, so I think you guys have the benefit of being able and willing to do that, which is great.
You will get it. Okay.
And before you do anything major in that center of the Blacktop Desert there, where Wayne's is and all that parking
Yeah.
spot there, the ULI study suggested that Marshall Road come around to this circle and then cut over through that parking lot basically to connect up.
Yeah,
over
I
here.
remember it. I don't remember exactly what it is. I remember it changed it. I just don't remember exactly what it was. I thought it went up Sycamore altogether. It came
No,
back through?
It came back through there.
Okay.
It didn't go all the way to Sycamore. It caught back up with where Sycamore and Marshall Road have there where you turn to Panera.
Yep.
And it was really, it brought the traffic through the center of it, kind of.
Yeah.
So as you're thinking about what to do in that center area, think about if there's a way to realign Marshall Road, because that alignment of Marshall Road has been a problem since day
Mhm.
one.
Yeah.
We always talked about it. I remember being at meetings here before this was built. How in the world would residents actually take their strollers and their children and their bicycles across Marshall Road to get to the other side?
Yeah.
How does a resident get to the other side? Well, you don't.
What I remembered from ULI was it talked about this bifurcation.
Yeah.
With 40% of the shops here and 60% of them over here, and I thought it actually moved the road over more towards the RTD and then had mixed multifamily housing there and made that more of a residential component.
They brought out from the RTD down through the center to that roundabout and look into the mountains. That's what they did. They put a street down there, kind of.
Really, down over to the left?
Well, yeah, well, you have to look at the ULI study, but it really moved it to.
Where did they have the housing? Down here by Sycamore
They had
or
it by
over here by the
Sycamore.
RTD?
They had it
They had it by
Sycamore.
Sycamore,
Yeah.
and we had the RTD housing there too,
Okay.
plus, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was when we were talking with possibility of
Yeah.
a developer that wanted.
But that
to
was
put-
not ULI.
Yes, that was in
Yeah,
the
ULI had the
study.
housing by
Mhm.
Sycamore, I know that.
And RTD?
Yep, both of
So
them
it
were
had
developed.
both places?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, well,
Right.
half my memory was correct. But yeah, obviously that potential housing overlooking Sycamore into the park
Yeah,
is.
I like the idea of that, I
Yeah.
just don't know the reality of that because of
Right.
the target parcel, that's my only concern.
But
and
what
is-
if what if Office Max goes out? Did Office, do they own or lease?
They lease. So
Okay.
the only part, we don't own Target, and we don't own Costco, we own everything, and now Ethan Allen. Other than that, we own everything.
And how did
else.
you say PetSmart's doing?
PetSmart as a company is not doing well.
Okay, so what if, worse news,
Yeah.
they go?
So if
both-
I got those 2 boxes back, then I think that that does open up some things in terms of being able to fit some sort of multifamily component over that way. The only, off the top of my head, again, without really studying it, just off the cuff comment is, then I don't know how that solves the connectivity between the 2 centers, because really, right now, you essentially have 2 shopping centers, right?
I don't care one bit about that. I'm not going to solve that anyway. But if Office Max and PetSmart would both,
Mhm.
something would happen to them, then that area between, the parking there between that and where Wayne's and whatever that
Mhm.
plaza is, that's your perfect plaza
Correct, and we
project.
own that, correct. We
Right?
own
So
that.
can you imagine if that's housing and then you have this cool plaza bordered here, then it opens up for some real interesting things to
Yeah,
happen
you
on that
could
right
do,
side.
you could do something if something happened there,
Yeah.
I think.
And then you can figure out the roads.
Yeah.
We've got plenty of roads issues on the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I ultimately, I'd like the 2 sides of the street to connect better, and I don't know the answer to that as I sit here, but ultimately, I think they need to. You know, we've looked at it just, we've just had the conversation, just digging into our entire Colorado portfolio. I was just out here a couple months ago with our chief investment officer, who just, as he toured the center, made the comment of, if I were going to sell this shopping center, I wouldn't sell it like this, I'd actually sell it as 2 separate shopping centers. It'd probably be 2 different buyers.
Oh.
Um,
Well, he recognizes the same
Yeah.
problem then.
Yeah, so, and it shops that way.
Yeah, it shops that way. People try to get into,
Yeah.
go right or go left.
Correct.
They split. As soon as they turn on to Marshall, it's you're jockeying to.
Yeah, when I'm at the
which way
center
you're
and
going.
I typically use the signal over by Panda, I'm the only one at the signal crossing the road.
Yeah.
Everybody's turning left or right, and nobody else goes across. Every time
That
I'm
takes
there.
a long
Yeah.
time for that light to
Yeah.
change too.
I'm looking at at a map, and it's the satellite map, and it's really just phenomenal. It's interesting, I've never looked at a satellite image of this, when the cars are a quarter mile away from each other.
Yeah.
It's really interesting
Yeah.
to look at. There's a handful of cars in the middle, in the center, but all the cars are either
Yep.
at Costco or Target or on the other side.
Exactly.
There's no hope of walking
I
anywhere.
But
recommend.
it's interesting because the Costco lot is basically, used. I mean, there's some space at the end, but it seems like Costco actually can fill that
Are
lot,
you
certainly
doing
on the
satellite
weekends.
too?
Yeah, it's on satellite.
Can you
the-
flip that so we can see it?
But on the Target lot, it's
Yeah.
like half.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking at the
It's
same.
never full.
The same thing, right in
And
front
I
of
think
the.
if my memory serves me right, you might know
better.
better than I do, I think that Costco is 185 million in sales, I think
And
is the
how,
number I
is
have.
that current?
I don't know, this is from Google Maps. So.
It's probably a couple of
Yeah.
years, but and who knows, it could
We
be
don't,
2
we don't
separate
discuss
ones.
individual
So-
stores.
Yeah, that's the number I
Versus
think
what's
they
there,
gave us at
what's
one
that
point, was
right?
185.
But they do really well, and they draw from a huge radius.
Sure.
Which is unusual. Most of them will draw from a smaller radius.
Right.
But these guys, this Costco goes way out, pulls.
Yeah, and so the Boulder shopper's coming to this Costco, right? But
Right.
the Boulder shopper has a Target. They don't have to
Right,
come to this
right.
Target.
Well,
Exactly.
the college kids love that Target, man. You couldn't even get in last week with
Yeah.
Oh,
CU.
Yeah, they were,
I mean-
carts were everywhere
Right,
pushing.
right,
yeah.
right.
And
Ted
that
Lewis.
target draws also from Broomfield too. I mean, there are
Yeah.
people on the west side of Broomfield, that's the closest target to
Right, right,
they
right.
come to. So I mean,
Yep.
Mhm.
it is a destination.
Yep.
Okay. That's
Okay.
excellent.
We really appreciate you.
Yeah,
today.
no problem. You guys know how to get in touch with me. I'll start speaking with Andrew and come up with some plans, and then I'll just work through you and we'll coordinate.
Yeah, it would be great to read in Andrew around the good work that our committee is doing on the
Yeah.
sub-area planning, and then have, it'd just be great to put him on a plane and let him meet with the team. That'd be great if we could have him for a couple hours.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe even I'll just see if I can coordinate something with his boss, our head of redevelopment for the whole company.
I actually would have loved for you to, and probably would be a little late because I think, aren't they trying to wrap up this sub-area proposal?
Mm-hmm.
I wish we had had this meeting 6 months ago, because to have planning commission to be here, or for you to meet separately with planning commission and hear their ideas in the sub-area plan.
Yeah.
The
And we're
the more
happy-
you
Yeah,
know
that's
about
all
what
done.
we're thinking.
So the next time
the
they're
more we
meeting,
know.
I can come back. Just
Okay.
whenever that meeting is, just let me know and we can come back. And even though I typically come here quarterly, I can come here anytime. So
Great.
it doesn't,
Well,
it's easy.
because very valuable. And I suggest, guys, this is the first time I've ever seen a map like this. This is terrific. Put it in your keep file, and I suggest
So all
the
you have to
planning
do,
commission get these.
if you want any of this information, if you just, you don't even have to remember to go to our website, just Google Brixmor Superior Marketplace, it'll come up.
Oh, really?
And then just go to marketing info and all of this stuff is there.
Oh,
So
wow.
these, your radius gap analysis are there?
It's all there.
Really?
Yeah, everything is all there publicly, yeah.
We don't need a password or access or anything. You give this to the world?
It's all there.
Wow.
Yep.
But this map's very
So,
valuable.
yeah, and you, I think there's probably a few more things besides this even on there, but all of that's on there. And yeah, no password, nothing. So-
Brixmore.com.
Yep. Yep. So, all right. Perfect.
Thank
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Great, thanks for coming in. It's good to meet you.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thanks. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Can we go back to the discussion of the town 15?
Maybe some of those documents I
Sure.
can make bigger.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, because you can get them off the website, huh?
We
Yeah.
left the conversation whether or not to do
Literally
open
right there.
space on the town 15. And again, just so silence is not deemed acceptance of the idea or agreement, I actually don't think open space is a good idea for the town 15. Largely because we have the trailhead right there. We've got Colton Trail right there, so it's not needed. I actually look forward to the town 15 being developed in a way that completes that roundabout entrance into town with amenities. I think it's reasonable to consider complementary residential there. I also think it's reasonable to consider a community component, whether or not this is a community center-like building or playing fields. I sort of in my mind see a building coupled with playing fields. That's why when I look at the one thing, the schematic of the community center from Barker Rink or CCAT that's in the packet, and how it's actually, I don't have it up right now, but how it's angled on the lot. Did anybody call that up when we were talking? So if you go to the community space discussion and look at is it the SPRC concept? Yeah. If you call that up, that building and parking and whatnot is, to me, takes up a wide swath of land. If it were repositioned, it actually would leave, I think, significant land for fields. And so I do not see this very valuable corner coming off the roundabout, right across the street from major open space, becoming open space. I see it instead becoming amenities involving things like this, potential with the popularity of this new iteration of Cal Monte across the street. I can see it being something complementary to that across the street. But I don't see it as best used as open space. That's my opinion.
Okay. Anyone else on that topic?
Yeah, I would only say that I would incline more toward what Sandy said than open space.
I think we can get a bit of better value for the town out of it rather than open space, and there's other opportunities that would be a larger open space opportunity, and those would be over along Coyote Ridge. There's areas there of CenturyLink that are undevelopable. You know, they can't put buildings on them. So I think we'd be better served to go after open space there rather than a piece that's of land that's surrounded by streets, 2 streets on either side, on 2 sides, and then houses on the one side, and then community park on the other. There's better value to get from that land than open space, the Town 15 I'm talking about.
If we're going around the horn, I'll just comment around the Coyote Ridge first, since you brought it up. I would agree, it is certainly looks unbuildable. I'm amazed every time I'm in Southern California or even Northern California what they could build. And if you haven't driven by the building, the really 3 buildings on Indiana across from level 3, they moved more dirt than you could possibly imagine. So I don't think we could label anything as unbuildable on Coyote Ridge. I think the engineers will figure it out, and even if they may not really figure it out, they'll try to figure it out. So I think there's high risk of somebody coming into Coyote Ridge and trying to be clever, and I worry about it all the time. In terms of Town 15, open space, or anything else, my point is, I don't know. We have not prioritized it as a board and have not engaged the community in what the community needs, so I feel like it would be inappropriate for me to comment on what I think is best there outside of reinforcing the property is not for sale.
Chris?
As far as Town 15 goes, it doesn't really matter to me that much. It's just an idea that we can throw that out there. But there's different levels of open space. We could have, it could be more manicured, it could be more like a park. But again, I think that the next board would be on track to set it up for next year discussion with the community and really see what we should go put there. I think this should go back to OSAC and have them reprioritize and not. If I were them, I would take out of consideration that anything is maybe under contract. And is that possible to do, Kendra? We're not under contract for being reviewed for development. I would say that they should put the wish list out there and say this is our priority. This is what we would like. If the Hodgson Harris Reservoir area was available, would they want that as their highest priority? So I think they should go back and reprioritize everything.
They did. They've got Saharia's high, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but not to Chris's point. Chris's point is to take out the likely developed parcels that are not likely to become open space targets. They still they still have Zaharias as number 2. They have Anderson, I think, as number 5. They have Town 15 as number 4. So they have these parcels that don't necessarily reflect the likelihood of whether or not they're actually going to be ever open space because there's an imminent application on it.
Okay.
And that's the Chris's point, right?
I would say that they should maybe do 2 different lists. I mean, what's their pie in the sky? What would they like to have? What's their priority? Is it still current? I mean, have they done that recently? Is that something that's just been done?
Yeah,
That was the one
just
that
this
was
past
done.
year,
Yeah.
they updated their.
And then
What is Saharia's? 3?
2.
2, yeah. And that's a recent upgrade.
Right, I think it's CenturyLink is number 1, Mr. Harris is number 2,
So
Rogers
they're
Farms
doing it
number 3.
independent of,
Town
they're
15
doing
is
it all
what
on
is
its own
number
Yeah, I think
merits.
you're right.
Is that what I'm hearing you
Yeah,
say?
that's,
Okay.
but the other way as well. I mean, if these are restricted because they're under contract or they're under review for development, then what is the next priority list? What then goes to number 2? What goes to number 1? Because we've been talking about level 3, or whatever we're calling it now,
Forever.
more than we've been on the board. And I remember before Clint, Andrew had gone several times to meet with them, and
Mhm.
we just never got any traction. So I don't know, if that's ever going to happen. So I think there should be an alternative list as well.
Yeah, I agree though with Kevin. Never say never. If they can develop on the cliffs of Malibu, they can develop here. It's at a cost, everything at a cost.
But you have CenturyLink, who's not an out there kind of, doesn't appear to me to be the out there kind of company that are going to try and develop on every little tiny crack and crevice. So I'm saying that that's the best opportunity, and we talked about this earlier, the Trust for Public Lands, to someone like them, those people should go to CenturyLink and say, here's what we'd like to see. Is there any way we can work together on this? Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just state my position on Town 15. So first and foremost, I think before we do anything, my overarching belief on Town 15 is we need to have a massive community outreach, so we take the pulse of the community to see what they actually want to do with this parcel. OSAC has targeted the site as a potential open space acquisition, and Chris brought that idea up at one of our board meetings about using open space funds to designate it as open space. I think that's a unique idea, and one of the ways to potentially fund some other park improvements. I'm certainly open to that. I'm also open to it becoming fields or parks. There was a suggestion on one of the Facebook groups for a town arboretum or something like that. Just
Equestrian Center.
yeah, there was an equestrian center suggestion. I mean, there's all these sorts of potential possibilities that I would never think of something like that. But that's the whole point of having the community discussion, because we might be missing an opportunity. But right now I'm totally fine with it staying as is, remaining unimproved land that we own, that we control, and focusing our efforts on other priorities. This parcel hasn't been a priority for the board, and I don't really see a need for it to change, to become a priority right now. We own it, we control it. There's no threat of imminent development, and I'm totally fine with it staying that way.
Hey, Mark, though.
And I think we've got enough on our plate, and frankly, we have a limited amount of time. So when we are easily distracted and all of a sudden diverted into talking about something that wasn't one of our priorities, that causes us to be less focused and have less time on other things that are equally or more important.
The fact is, it was a priority in 2014, 4 short years ago, and that is what led us to acquire it.
Right.
This process to acquire it was involved, right?
And I'm glad we did.
And so we can't say, that's not that long ago in the course of history. And so it was a priority.
Yeah, but
And
the
it
reason
was-
why it's a priority now
it
and why
wa-
it's back on our radar is because somebody made an offer to purchase it.
Right.
It otherwise would not be something that we would be talking about today.
Possibly.
Right.
That's
All right,
right.
I'll close out with my thoughts on it, and we need to break down for our committee interview and the regular meeting. I will echo just about everything you said, Mark and Kevin, really, that I'm not in, I want to have a robust engagement with the community if we do anything with it, but I also want us to not take our eye off downtown Superior, parks, all of the important things that we've got to do down there. The discussion of having community amenities at Town 15, I want to rule out everything at downtown Superior. In fact, I think that's where those amenities should be, is in downtown Superior and not on this site. So I would probably lean more towards open space, parks, fields, creative uses, those sorts of things, possibly housing if it made sense. But I'm not in any hurry to do any of that, and want to not get distracted and stay focused on what we need to be doing. So, good retreat, and let's bring down the tables. Good evening. We're going to continue our work session. Actually, we're right at the end of our retreat, and we have an advisory committee interview that we're going to conduct here before the 7 o'clock meeting. We have Todd Bergeson to interview.
Yes. Thanks, man. Come on up, Todd. Thanks. Todd's interested in the Open Space Advisory Committee, and then a second is ProStack. Yes.
Yes, please come on up to the podium. Just maybe give a quick introduction of yourself. And
Yep. Todd Bergeson. Moved here about 2 years ago, and I've been involved in a bunch of stuff in Boulder and sale of a company, and kind of have my focus back that way and ready to get involved in the town more. And so I saw this as an opportunity and wanted to see if I could be of help.
great. We appreciate your interest in the committee. And now open it up to the board for questions.
So tell us about your interest in open space in particular. Why are you gravitating towards that committee versus any of the other committees that we have here in town?
So in Boulder, I lived in the south part of Boulder down in Tantra Park, and there's lots of trails and open space down there. Currently, I live in the south part of Rock Creek, and there's a desire on my part to make it feel like there's good open space for the community and for myself personally, and to protect that as well as develop it as things, you know, the rest of the town is developed.
Okay. Others?
How did you choose Superior?
My son actually wanted to go to Monarch. Unlike his brother and sister who went to Fairview, he wanted to kind of go off on his own. I had sold a business in Boulder. My wife works down in Denver, and it seemed to be a good move. We liked the sort of the community feel of both Louisville and Superior, and just liked the way Superior felt, I guess.
Okay.
Good. Anything further from anyone else?
Pretty easy tonight.
Okay.
We're pretty easy on you.
Hey, that seems
Yeah, we're
really
going
easy.
easy on you.
Yeah. I was
All right,
looking
I'll
for tough
close out
questions.
with the last question that I ask all of our applicants, and that is about conflict of interest. Do you have any potentials for conflict of interest, like you have another side business that does open space things?
I do not have anything that goes along with that. I do CEO coaching, and I run CEO roundtables, and so I don't see any conflict that I'm aware of. I don't work with any businesses that have anything to do with open space or construction or anything like that in this area, so I don't
Very
think
good.
so.
Okay. Thanks again for your interest, and we'll be
Yep.
acting on this soon, so thank you. All right, the last announcement from our retreat is that our next retreat will be January 2019. Is there anything further for our retreat? Or we'll close
So
out.
they're only going to be, how many have we had this year?
We've had two. Or we've had three?
This is the third one? Oh, I see. Yeah, because typically I would, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
No, well,
They're public.
I'm going to be here. But why wouldn't it be in November, right after the election? So you hit the ground running rather than lose a couple of months.
Yeah.
That's what perplexed me, caused me to stutter here.
Well, they haven't been before, I know. The first
Huh?
one I ever went to, or we went to, was in January. Early January, yeah.
But the inefficiency, since we have a couple of minutes here, the inefficiency has always been talking about town board goals and everything in January, and that takes a couple of months. Whereas if you've got the benefit of a new board in November, have a retreat in November, early December, and hit the ground running and have all that already discussed, ready to get after it. Just saying.
Okay. Okay. I'd be supportive of a November. Yes?
Yeah, I
Would
mean,
you?
I think for purposes of getting the newly elected trustees up to speed as soon as possible. We should try to get them involved and get their thoughts on what we're going to prioritize as early as possible. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
It's a good point. Good suggestion.
All right, so possibly November, early December, just kind of depending on calendars and everything. Okay. Kevin, good? Good. Good with that? Good. Okay. All right, anything further before we adjourn the retreat? Okay, we're going to adjourn. We'll be right back at the 7 o'clock hour.